Paris, 1897. A woman faints over a pile of scientific notes. She has been eating only dry bread and radishes for 3 days. Her room has no heating. Her hands bleed from chemical burns. But in those crumpled papers, written with cheap ink, lies hidden the key that will decipher one of the deepest mysteries of the universe. Her name is Marie Curie, and she is about to discover a power that will transform medicine, destroy entire cities, and forever change our understanding of reality. But first she will have to survive hunger. Because progress is not born from power. It is born from hunger. From the hunger to understand. Europe, late 19th century. Imagine a continent wrapped in gray shadows. Cobblestone streets where coal stains the air black. Factories spew smoke toward perpetually clouded skies. The metallic sound of steam engines resonates like the mechanical heartbeat of an era that believes itself invincible but is, in reality, barely beginning to understand the world it inhabits. The Industrial Revolution has changed the way we work, but it has not changed the essential. We remain blind to the fundamental forces that surround us. Electricity is a recent phenomenon, barely domesticated, still mysterious. Electric light is a luxury that only the rich can afford. Most of the world still lives under the trembling light of candles and oil lamps. And in that darkness, science is a territory dominated exclusively by men with resources, men with surnames that open doors for them, men who can dedicate their lives to thinking without worrying about where the next meal will come from. Diseases ravage without mercy. Tuberculosis devours the lungs of millions. Cancer is an absolute death sentence, without hope, without treatment, without even understanding. Doctors operate without understanding what causes infections. Surgeons work with instruments that are barely cleaned between one patient and another. Life expectancy hovers around 45 years. Children die from diseases that today we would consider trivial. And the worst of all is ignorance. We don't know what kills us. We don't know how our own body works. We don't know what holds matter together, what keeps atoms united, what invisible energy vibrates in every corner of the universe. In the laboratories of Europe, scientists work with growing frustration. They discovered X-rays just 2 years earlier in 1895, thanks to Wilhelm Röntgen. Those ghostly images of human bones visible through living flesh have shocked the world. Suddenly, the invisible becomes visible. But no one understands what those rays are. No one knows where they come from. No one comprehends the source of their energy. Physics is at a crossroads. Scientists know there is something more, something hidden in the very structure of matter, something that emits energy in ways that defy all known laws. But they don't have the tools to see it. They don't have the knowledge to understand it. And most importantly, they don't have the imagination to conceive it. That is the Europe of the 19th century. A world of mechanical progress but scientific blindness. A world where women are considered intellectually inferior by nature. A world where poverty is not just the lack of money, but the lack of opportunities, the lack of education, the lack of dignity. And in that dark world, under an oil lamp that barely illuminates a frozen room in the Latin Quarter of Paris, a young Polish woman trembles with cold and hunger while solving equations that the male professors at the Sorbonne consider impossible for a female mind. That young woman is Marie Sklodowska. She is not yet Curie. She is not yet the most celebrated scientist in history. She has not yet discovered anything. At this moment, in 1891, she is just a poor immigrant struggling to survive in a foreign city, with a language she barely masters, studying a career that society considers inappropriate for her sex. But inside her burns something that no poverty can extinguish. An obsession. A hunger that is not just physical, although physical hunger is very real. It is a hunger for knowledge. A hunger to understand. A hunger to prove that intelligence has no gender, that science knows no nationalities, that truth does not discriminate between rich and poor. But before arriving in Paris, before becoming that hungry student, before all of that, one must understand where she comes from. One must understand what forges a person capable of enduring years of brutal poverty for an idea, for a dream, for a truth that no one else can see. Warsaw, Poland, 1867. The Russian Empire controls the country with an iron fist. It is not just a military occupation. It is a systematic attempt to erase Polish culture from existence. The Russians prohibit the teaching of the Polish language in schools. They prohibit Polish books. They prohibit cultural gatherings. Any act of resistance is punished with exile to Siberia or worse. In this context of cultural oppression is born Maria Salomea Sklodowska, the youngest of 5 siblings. Her family belongs to the impoverished Polish petty nobility. Her father is a mathematics and physics teacher. Her mother runs a school for girls. They are educators, intellectuals, Polish patriots. And for that reason, for that national pride, for that silent resistance, they will pay a terrible price. Little Maria, whom everyone calls Minia, grows up in a home where books are sacred but dangerous. Her father keeps prohibited texts hidden behind wardrobes. He reads Polish classics in a low voice with the curtains closed at night when Russian inspectors cannot hear him. The girl learns that knowledge is power but also danger. She learns that there are truths that power fears. And she learns, above all, that her mind is her only true possession, the only thing no one can confiscate from her. But tragedy strikes early. Her older sister, Zofia, dies of typhus at 14. Maria is 9 years old. 2 years later, her mother, ill with tuberculosis for some time, finally succumbs. Maria is 11 years old and has lost her sister and her mother. Her father, consumed by grief and guilt, takes refuge even more in books. The family, which was already poor, sinks into misery. The father loses his job due to his political sympathies. They have to rent rooms to students to survive. The house that was once a home becomes a crowded boarding house where privacy is an impossible luxury. In the midst of this devastation, Maria clings to the only thing she has, her mind. She devours books. She memorizes entire pages. She learns languages on her own: French, German, Russian, English. At 15 she finishes high school with a gold medal. She is the best student. But in Poland occupied by Russia, universities do not admit women. None. Higher education is completely forbidden for her sex. It doesn't matter how brilliant she is. It doesn't matter how desperately she wants to learn. The doors are closed. And there is no key. This is where many young women would have given up. This is where most would have accepted a domestic destiny, a convenient marriage, a life of silent submission. But Maria is not like most. She and her older sister, Bronia, make a pact. Bronia wants to study medicine. Maria wants to study physics and mathematics. Both know that there is only one place in Europe where a woman can truly study science: Paris, the Sorbonne. But neither has money for the trip, much less for tuition. So they make a desperate plan, almost impossible. Maria will work as a governess, living in the houses of wealthy families, caring for children, teaching privileged young ladies who have more opportunities than her simply for having been born in the right country. With her miserable salary, she will send money to Bronia so she can study medicine in Paris. And when Bronia finishes and can work as a doctor, it will be Maria's turn. It is a plan that requires years. Years of sacrifice. Years of watching other lives advance while yours freezes in time. Years of serving families that treat you as invisible, as useful furniture. Maria is 18 years old when she begins this self-imposed penance. She works in houses in the Polish countryside. Some employers are kind. Others treat her with a contempt reserved for servants. In one of these houses she meets Kazimierz Zarowski, the eldest son of the family. They are almost the same age. He studies in Warsaw. They share intellectual interests. They fall in love. For a moment, Maria allows herself to dream of a different future. A future of love, of family, of normal life. But when Kazimierz proposes marriage, his family categorically forbids it. A poor governess. A woman without a dowry. A Pole without resources. It is unthinkable. The humiliation is complete. Maria then understands, with brutal clarity, that in this world her intellectual value means nothing against her lack of social status. It is not enough to be brilliant. It is not enough to be hardworking. If you are a woman and poor, you are nothing. This experience hardens her. The pain of rejection transforms into steel determination. She sends more money to Bronia. She studies mathematics on her own. She reads physics treatises in French to prepare herself. At night, after fulfilling her duties as a governess, she stays awake until dawn solving complex problems by candlelight. Her eyes suffer. Her health weakens. But her mind sharpens like a razor. Finally, in 1891, after 6 years of exhausting work, Bronia's letter arrives. She has finished medicine. She has married a Polish doctor. They have a small apartment in Paris. There is room for Maria. It is time. Maria Sklodowska is 24 years old when she finally arrives in Paris. She is older than most students. She has lived more than them. She has suffered more. She has waited more. When she gets off the train at Gare du Nord, with a broken suitcase containing everything she owns, she looks at the streets of Paris like someone contemplating the promised land. Here there are no Russian inspectors. Here there are no laws prohibiting women from studying. Here at the Sorbonne she can be what she really is, a scientist. But Paris is expensive. Brutally expensive. Bronia and her husband live in a small apartment on the outskirts. Maria stays with them initially, but the daily trip to the Sorbonne takes hours. Hours she could be studying. Besides, she can feel that she is a burden on her newly married sister. So with the little money she has saved, she rents an attic in the Latin Quarter, near the university. To say it is an attic is generous. It is a loft on the 6th floor without an elevator. In summer it is an oven. In winter it is a refrigerator. It has a narrow bed, a broken chair, a tiny table and a basin for washing. There is no running water. She has to climb 6 floors carrying water. There is no heating. In Parisian winters, when the temperature drops below zero, Maria sleeps with all the clothes she has on, covered with her coat and all the towels she possesses. Sometimes the water in the basin is frozen by morning. Money is constant torture. Her budget is 3 rubles a day. 3 rubles. With that she has to pay rent, books, food, everything. She makes meticulous calculations. Bread, half a franc. Chocolate, 2 cents. Eggs. Only on Sundays if she has saved enough during the week. There are days when she eats only radishes and bread. Days when her only meal is a cup of tea and dry biscuits. Her body, already thin, becomes skeletal. Her cheeks sink. Her eyes enlarge. Her skin acquires a sickly pallor. But malnutrition is slow. It is insidious. It doesn't kill you suddenly. It weakens you gradually. Maria studies 12, 14, 16 hours a day. She attends all classes. She reads all required texts and many more. She takes meticulous notes. She solves all practice problems. And all this with a brain that is not receiving enough nutrients. All this with a body that is slowly consuming itself. One day she faints in the library. Another day, in the middle of a physics class, her vision goes black and she has to grab the desk to keep from falling. Bronia finds out and forces her to stay with her for a few days, feeding her real food, meat, vegetables, hot soups. Maria recovers some strength and immediately returns to her frozen attic. She cannot be far from the library. She cannot waste time traveling. Time is the only thing she cannot afford to waste. Her classmates are mostly men. Some ignore her. Others watch her with curiosity as if she were a biological anomaly, a rare phenomenon. A woman in physics class. A woman in mathematics class. A woman who not only understands the equations but solves them faster than they do. Some professors are respectful. Others clearly disapprove of her presence. But Maria is not there to make friends. She is not there to be accepted. She is there to learn. And she learns with a ferocity that frightens. In 1893, barely 2 years after arriving in Paris, Maria obtains her degree in physics. She is first in her class. First. In a class dominated by French men from wealthy families, a poor and hungry Polish immigrant has surpassed them all. But she does not stop. She obtains a small scholarship. She returns to Poland briefly to see her father, who is ill. She uses what little money she has left to return to Paris. She wants a second degree, this time in mathematics. Because 1 degree is not enough. She needs more tools. She needs more knowledge. She needs to be absolutely prepared for what is coming, even though she still does not know exactly what it is. During this period, Maria lives in a bubble of almost total isolation. She has no social life. She has no close friends. She has no time for romance. Her existence is reduced to three places: her attic, the Sorbonne, and the library. She studies theoretical physics and applied mathematics with equal intensity. She reads the latest works on electricity, magnetism, thermodynamics. She is particularly fascinated by Heinrich Hertz's work on electromagnetic waves, by Michael Faraday's experiments, by James Clerk Maxwell's equations that unified electricity and magnetism in an elegant and revolutionary theory. But there is something new in the scientific air. Something no one fully understands yet. Wilhelm Röntgen has discovered X-rays. Henri Becquerel, almost by accident, has discovered that uranium emits some kind of mysterious radiation that can impress photographic plates even in darkness. No one knows what this radiation is. No one knows where the energy comes from. It is an absolute mystery. And mysteries attract Maria like light attracts moths. In 1894, while studying for her second degree, Maria receives an unusual commission. The Society for the Encouragement of National Industry asks her to investigate the magnetic properties of different types of steel. It is paid work. Not much, but something. The problem is that she needs a laboratory. At the Sorbonne there is no space available for a woman who is still only a student. A Polish professor visiting Paris suggests she contact a young French scientist who might be able to help her. His name is Pierre Curie. Pierre Curie is 35 years old in 1894. He is a brilliant but socially maladjusted physicist. He has worked with his brother Jacques on the discovery of piezoelectricity, the phenomenon by which certain crystals generate electricity when pressure is applied to them. He has designed extraordinarily precise measuring instruments. He has published important works on magnetism and crystallography. But, despite his achievements, he does not have a prestigious academic position. He works as head of works at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry of Paris, a second-rate institution compared to the Sorbonne. He is shy, reserved, almost hermit-like. He has rejected several marriage proposals because he considers family life would interfere with his scientific work. His only love is science. When Maria Sklodowska appears in his laboratory in the spring of 1894, Pierre Curie does not expect anything special. But what he finds is something he had not experienced before. A mind that functions at his same speed. A person who understands his explanations without needing to simplify them. A woman who not only has theoretical knowledge but also practical laboratory skills. And, most importantly, a person who shares his absolute obsession with understanding natural phenomena. Their first conversation is not romantic. It is scientific. They talk about magnetism, about the properties of steel, about measurement techniques, about the latest discoveries in physics. Pierre shows her his instruments. Maria immediately understands how they work and suggests improvements. Pierre is surprised, impressed, intrigued. He offers her space in his laboratory for her research on steel. They work together for months. The attraction is gradual, almost imperceptible at first. It is not sudden passion. It is mutual recognition. They are two lonely minds who finally find someone who speaks their language. Two people who have sacrificed normal relationships for science and suddenly discover that perhaps they do not have to choose. That perhaps it is possible to have both things. Pierre falls in love first. He writes letters to Maria. Strange letters, not at all conventional, where he talks more about science than about feelings but where the feeling underlies every line. He proposes marriage. He tells her he could move to Poland with her if that is what she wants. That he is willing to learn Polish. That what is important is being together, working together, discovering together. Maria hesitates. She has learned not to trust easily. Kazimierz hurt her deeply. Besides, there is loyalty to Poland. Her father expects her to return. Her country needs her. But Pierre is different. Pierre does not see her gender as an obstacle. Pierre does not see her poverty as a problem. Pierre sees her as an equal, as a colleague, as an intellectual partner. And that is something Maria has never experienced before. She returns to Poland in the summer of 1894 to visit her father. There, in the tranquility of the Polish countryside, Maria reflects on her future. She can stay and become a teacher in an occupied Poland. She can teach at the floating university, the clandestine classes that Polish patriots secretly organize. She can be part of the cultural resistance. Or she can return to Paris, marry Pierre, and dedicate herself completely to scientific research. The decision is not easy. But in the end, science wins. She returns to Paris in the autumn. In April 1895, Maria Sklodowska and Pierre Curie marry in a simple civil ceremony, without pomp, without luxury. Maria wears a dark blue dress that she will be able to wear later in the laboratory. There are no flowers. There is no party. Just two scientists committing to a life together. As a wedding gift, they use the money they have saved to buy 2 bicycles. They spend their honeymoon pedaling through the French countryside, sleeping in cheap inns, talking about science under the stars. It is 1895. Maria finally has companionship, a home, a stability she had never known. But she also has something more important, a scientific partner. Pierre has contacts, experience, equipment. Maria has hunger, determination, and a brilliant mind. Together they are stronger than apart. And together they are about to change the world. But first they need a project. They need a question no one has answered. They need a mystery that challenges everything known. And that mystery is there, waiting in Henri Becquerel's puzzling experiments on the strange radiations of uranium. In 1896, Marie Curie, no longer Sklodowska, begins looking for a topic for her doctorate. And her gaze falls on that mysterious radiation that no one understands. She does not yet know that she has just chosen the project that will consume her life, that will destroy her health, that will make her immortal, and that will open a completely new era in the history of humanity. The Europe of the late 19th century desperately needed an answer. Science was at a crossroads. Physicists had achieved amazing accomplishments. They had domesticated electricity. They had formulated the laws of thermodynamics. They had built a classical physics that seemed capable of explaining almost everything. Isaac Newton had given the world the laws of motion. Maxwell had unified electricity and magnetism. Everything seemed to fit. Everything seemed predictable. Many veteran physicists believed that science was almost complete, that only some minor details remained to be solved, some decimals to be specified. But there were cracks in that perfect building. Cracks that were widening. The Michelson-Morley experiment had failed to detect the ether, that invisible medium that supposedly filled space and allowed the propagation of light. The problem of black body radiation defied all explanation. And now these strange rays, X-rays that pass through matter. Radiations from uranium that do not run out, that require no external source of energy, that violate the principle of conservation of energy as it was then understood. Humanity needed to understand where that energy came from. Because if matter could emit energy spontaneously, then everything we thought we knew about the universe was wrong. And if we were wrong about something so fundamental, what else was wrong? How much more remained to be discovered? In hospitals, doctors continued fighting diseases without adequate tools. They could see broken bones with the new X-rays, but they could not see internal tumors. They could not diagnose cancers until it was too late. They had no way to destroy cancerous tissue without destroying everything else. They needed new tools, new forms of energy, new ways to see inside the human body without opening it. In industry, engineers sought more powerful sources of energy. Coal moved steam engines, but it was dirty, heavy, inefficient. Electricity was the future, but batteries were weak and quickly exhausted. What if there existed a source of energy hidden in matter itself? What if that energy could be released? The implications were enormous. Unlimited power. Endless progress. But more than anything, humanity needed to understand. We needed to know what we are. What the world is made of. What holds matter together. What happens inside the atom. Because without that fundamental knowledge, we were building buildings on sand. We were advancing blindly. And when you advance blindly, you eventually crash into something. Marie Curie did not think about practical applications when she chose to study uranium radiation for her doctorate. She thought about pure questions. Fundamental questions. Why does uranium emit this radiation? Where does the energy come from? Is it a property of uranium specifically, or is it something more general? Are there other elements that do the same? These were questions that no one had systematically formulated. Henri Becquerel had discovered the phenomenon almost by accident, but had not investigated it thoroughly. It was an unsolved mystery. Virgin territory. Anne-Marie had the tools, the knowledge, and above all, the tenacity to explore it. Pierre got her a space to work. To call it a laboratory is an exaggeration. It was a warehouse on the ground floor of the School of Physics and Chemistry, a damp room that was previously used to store material. It had no adequate ventilation. The roof leaked when it rained. In summer it was unbearably hot. In winter, freezing. But it had space for equipment. It had a work table. And most importantly, it was hers. Marie began methodically. First, she needed a method to accurately measure radiation. Pierre and his brother had invented an extraordinarily sensitive piezoelectric electrometer. Marie adapted it to measure the minuscule electrical currents that radiation produced by ionizing air. It was tedious work that required infinite patience. Each measurement took time. Each sample had to be carefully prepared. Each result had to be verified multiple times. And here is where Marie's character manifested in all its dimension. Where others would have made approximate measurements, she demanded absolute precision. Where others would have tested a few samples, she tested all known elements, all available compounds, all possible combinations. She worked alone, day after day, in that cold and damp warehouse, recording numbers in notebooks, adjusting instruments, preparing samples, measuring, noting, verifying. The results began to appear. Some elements were radioactive. Others were not. Uranium was radioactive. Thorium too. But the intensity of radiation did not depend on the chemical form of the element. It did not matter if it was pure uranium or a uranium compound. The radiation was the same. This was strange. Very strange. It suggested that the radiation did not come from the chemical properties of the element but from something deeper. From something in the atom itself. This conclusion was revolutionary. In 1898, most scientists still thought that the atom was indivisible, immutable, the fundamental unit of matter. But if the radiation came from the atom itself, then the atom could not be immutable. It had to have internal structure. Something had to be happening inside the atom that generated this energy. Marie did not know it yet, but she was knocking on the door of nuclear physics. She was about to reveal that matter is not solid, that atoms are not eternal, that the universe is much stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. But then she found something even stranger. She measured the radioactivity of a mineral called pitchblende, a uranium mineral. Pitchblende should be radioactive because it contains uranium. But when Marie measured its radioactivity, she discovered that it was 4 times more radioactive than it should be based on its uranium content. 4 times. This made no sense. Unless there was another element in the pitchblende. An unknown element. An element even more radioactive than uranium itself. Marie repeated the measurements. She verified her calculations. She tested different samples of pitchblende. The result was always the same. There was something there. Something invisible. Something no one had detected before because no one had been looking for radioactivity. All the chemists in the world had analyzed pitchblende. They had identified all its components. Or so they believed. But they had not looked for radioactive elements because the very concept of radioactivity was new. Marie went to Pierre with her results. Pierre was skeptical at first. A new element was an enormous discovery. They required extraordinary evidence. But when he reviewed Marie's measurements, when he saw how meticulous her work was, when he repeated some experiments and got the same results, he was convinced. There was something there. And if there was something there, they had to find it. Pierre made a decision. He would abandon his own research and join Marie on this project. They would work together. They would combine their skills. Pierre was an expert in precision measurements. Marie was an expert in chemistry. Together they would try to do the impossible. Isolate this unknown element from tons of pitchblende and prove to the world that it existed. It was 1898. Marie Curie was 31 years old. Pierre 39. They were about to embark on the most difficult, most exhausting, most dangerous work of their lives. They did not yet know it, but that work would make them famous. It would make them immortal. And it would slowly kill them. The problem facing the Curies was monumental. They had detected the presence of an unknown element in pitchblende. But detecting something and isolating it are two completely different things. Pitchblende is a complex mineral containing dozens of elements: uranium, lead, bismuth, iron, calcium, and many more. And somewhere within that chaotic mixture was hidden their mysterious element. An element present in such tiny quantities that all the chemists in the world had overlooked it. To isolate it, they would need to process massive quantities of pitchblende. Literal tons. And the process would be chemically complex, physically exhausting, and extremely expensive. But even before starting, there was a more basic problem. Money? Pitchblende was a valuable mineral. It was extracted mainly from mines in Joachimsthal in Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic. It was used to extract uranium, which was then employed to color glass and ceramics. After extracting the uranium, the residues were considered useless and discarded. But those residues were exactly what the Curies needed. If their theory was correct, the mysterious element would remain in those residues after removing the uranium. The Curies wrote to the mines of Joachimsthal asking about those residues. The response was unexpectedly positive. The residues were worthless. The miners would be happy to get rid of them. The Curies would only have to pay for transportation. So in 1898, several tons of pitchblende residues arrived in Paris. Tons of gray-greenish dust, damp, mixed with pine needles from the Bohemian forests where it had been stored in the open air. They unloaded it in the courtyard of the School of Physics and Chemistry. Marie looked at those mountains of mineral and knew she had months, perhaps years, of brutal work ahead. But she did not hesitate. This was her project, her doctorate, her obsession. And Pierre had decided to sacrifice his own research to help her. They could not fail. They could not give up. The shed where they worked was primitive beyond all description. It had a glass roof that did not insulate from heat or cold. The walls were thin. The floor was dirt. There was no fume hood. There was no adequate ventilation. In summer, the temperature exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. The air became unbreathable. In winter, when it snowed, the snow came through the cracks in the roof. They worked in thick coats and gloves, though gloves made delicate work difficult. At night, when the cold was unbearable, Pierre sometimes brought a small iron stove, but it barely heated a meter around it. The chemical separation process they designed was complex and required multiple steps. First, they had to dissolve the pitchblende in powerful acids. Marie worked with enormous cast iron cauldrons, mixing the pulverized mineral with sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid. The vapors were toxic. They burned the eyes, irritated the throat, caused constant coughing. But there was no protective equipment. No gas mask. No acid-resistant gloves. Marie worked with bare hands or with cloth gloves that immediately soaked through and allowed the acids to burn her skin. Then came the precipitation process. They added different chemical reagents to make the elements separate and precipitate at the bottom of the containers. They filtered the precipitates. They washed them. They dissolved them again. They precipitated them again. It was a process of gradual refinement, step by step, where each iteration removed some impurities but required hours of intense manual labor. Marie stirred cauldrons that weighed 20 kilos. She lifted sacks of mineral. She transported barrels of acid. Her body, already weakened by years of malnutrition, constantly suffered. Her arms ached. Her back ached. Her hands developed permanent scars from the chemical burns. Pierre worked mainly on measurements. After each stage of purification, they took a small sample and measured its radioactivity with their ultra-sensitive electrometer. If the radioactivity increased, it meant they were on the right path, that they were concentrating the mysterious element. If it decreased, it meant they had lost it in some discarded precipitate and had to go back. It was chemical detective work where each clue was a number, each error meant weeks of lost work. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The routine was exhausting. Marie got up early, left her daughter Irene with a nanny or with Pierre's father, and walked to the shed. She worked until it got dark. Sometimes long after it got dark. Then she returned home, ate something quick, put her into bed, and stayed up updating her laboratory notebooks. Each experiment meticulously documented. Each measurement recorded precisely. Each observation noted. Her notebooks filled with numbers, diagrams, procedures. She wrote in small, tight handwriting to save paper. The pages were stained with acid, with mineral dust, with her own dirty hands. The work was so physically demanding that Pierre sometimes had to help with the heavier tasks. Together they stirred the steaming cauldrons. Together they transported the sacks of mineral. At night, their hands were so cracked and sore they could barely hold the silverware to eat. Marie lost more weight. Her face became gaunt. Pierre developed constant pains in his legs and back, pains he attributed to exhaustion but which were probably the first signs of radiation poisoning. But as the months passed, something amazing began to happen. The radioactivity of their samples increased. With each purification cycle, with each stage of refinement, the intensity of the radiation became stronger. Much stronger. They were concentrating something. Something real. Something that emitted radiation with a power that defied imagination. In July 1898, after months of continuous work, they had managed to isolate a substance whose radioactivity was 400 times greater than that of uranium. 400 times. It was chemically similar to bismuth, but definitely not bismuth. It was something new. Marie proposed the name polonium in honor of her oppressed homeland, Poland. It was an act of political resistance and silent patriotism. Her country did not exist on official maps, erased by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. But now it would exist on the periodic table. It would exist in all science books in the world. It was her way of shouting that Poland was still alive, that Polish culture could not be destroyed, that a daughter of Poland had discovered something that would change the world. They published their results in July 1898 in the Proceedings of the French Academy of Sciences. The title of the paper was modest but revolutionary, On a New Radioactive Substance Contained in Pitchblende. The scientific community reacted with skepticism. A new element was an extraordinary announcement. It required extraordinary evidence. And the Curies had not isolated enough polonium to see it, weigh it, or determine its atomic weight precisely. They only had evidence of its existence based on its radioactivity. Traditional chemists did not accept that as proof. They wanted to see the element. They wanted a pure sample. They wanted a precise atomic weight. They wanted classic chemical evidence. Marie knew it. Pierre knew it. They had not finished. They had to continue. But when they kept working, when they kept purifying and refining, they discovered something even more surprising. There were two radioactive elements in pitchblende. Polonium was one. But there was another, even more radioactive, chemically similar to barium. This second element emitted radiation with an intensity that made polonium seem weak in comparison. In December 1898, barely 5 months after announcing polonium, they published another paper announcing the probable existence of this second element. Marie called it radium, from the Latin radius, meaning ray, because it glowed. It literally glowed in the dark. But again, they did not have enough to convince the skeptics. Again, they only had radioactive evidence, not solid chemical evidence. The task ahead was even more monumental than the previous one. Radium was present in even smaller quantities than polonium. To isolate a weighable amount of pure radium, they would need to process tons and tons of pitchblende. And the process would be even more complex because radium was chemically very similar to barium, one of the common components of pitchblende. Separating them would require thousands of fractional crystallizations, a tedious process where you dissolve a mixture and crystallize it repeatedly, taking advantage of slight differences in solubility to gradually separate the components. In 1899, Marie decided she had to do it. She had to isolate pure radium. She had to obtain enough to determine its atomic weight precisely. She had to prove beyond all doubt that radium was a new element. That would be her doctoral thesis. It would be the definitive proof. But the work would be Herculean. It would be the chemical equivalent of looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a mountain. Pierre fully supported the decision. In fact, he decided that the discovery of radium and polonium was so important that he too would leave his research on crystals to concentrate exclusively on understanding the properties of these new elements. The Curies became a team dedicated entirely to radioactivity. They divided the work. Marie would take care of the brutal chemical work of processing tons of pitchblende. Pierre would study the physical properties of radiation. The next 4 years were a hell of manual labor. Marie processed 20 kilos of mineral at a time. The complete process for each batch took weeks. Dissolve the mineral in acid. Precipitate. Filter. Washington dissolve again. Precipitate again. Filter again. And then the fractional crystallizations. Thousands of them. Each crystallization required dissolving the barium-radium salts in water, heating the solution, cooling it slowly to form crystals, separating the crystals from the liquid, dissolving again, crystallizing again. And each time, the most radioactive fraction concentrated slightly more. But only slightly. Each iteration removed only a tiny amount of barium. They needed thousands of iterations to obtain reasonably pure radium. Marie worked like an industrial laborer. But she was a laborer with a doctorate working on one of the most important scientific projects in history. She stirred boiling cauldrons with an iron bar. Her arms became muscular from so much physical work. Her hands, which had once been delicate, became rough, calloused, permanently stained with chemicals. Burns were constant. Acid splattered. Caustic vapors filled the shed. Marie coughed. Her eyes watered. But she did not stop. Pierre suffered too. The pains in his legs became chronic. He developed tremors in his hands. He had difficulty sleeping. He felt constantly fatigued. In 1900 he became seriously ill and had to stay in bed for weeks. Doctors could not diagnose what was wrong with him. They spoke of rheumatism, of neuralgia, of stress. They did not know he was being slowly poisoned by radiation. No one knew. The concept of radiation poisoning did not yet exist. The Curies handled highly radioactive materials with bare hands. They kept tubes of radium salts in their pockets. Pierre sometimes carried a radium tube in his vest to show colleagues, proud of its blue-green glow in the dark. During these years, their life was a routine of constant sacrifice. They got up early. Marie prepared breakfast for Irene. Sometimes Pierre's father came to help with the girl. Other times they left her with neighbors. Marie and Pierre walked together to the shed. They worked all day. They ate something quick at noon, usually bread and cheese they brought from home. They kept working until evening. They returned home exhausted. They ate dinner. Marie checked on Irene. And then, instead of resting, they updated their notebooks, analyzed results, planned the next experiments. Economically they remained poor. Pierre's work at the School of Physics and Chemistry paid little. Marie had no paid work. Her research was for her doctorate. It did not generate income. They lived modestly in a small apartment. They had no luxuries. They had no servants. Marie did the cleaning, the cooking, the shopping, and also worked 12 hours a day in the laboratory. Her health visibly deteriorated. She lost more weight. She developed a persistent cough. Her hands trembled from fatigue. But when someone suggested she rest, that she take a day off, she refused. She could not stop. The radium was there, hidden in tons of mineral, and she had to find it. Scientific solitude was also a burden. Most of the scientific community remained skeptical. The Curies presented their results at conferences and regularly published papers, but many older scientists did not take them seriously. A woman chemist was rare enough. A woman claiming to have discovered 2 new elements was simply too much. Rumors suggested that Pierre was the real scientist and that Marie was just his assistant. That Pierre did the intellectual work and Marie the manual work. That a woman could not have made such important discoveries on her own. These rumors infuriated Pierre. At every opportunity, he publicly clarified that the discovery of polonium and radium was primarily Marie's. That she had initiated the research. That she had developed the methods. That she was doing the Herculean work of isolating radium. But prejudices are hard to overcome. Society's preferred narrative was that of the male genius helped by his devoted wife, not that of the revolutionary woman scientist supported by her husband. But Marie did not work for recognition. She worked because she had to know. Because the mystery of radioactivity was more important than her comfort, than her health, than her reputation. Each day in the shed was one day closer to the truth. Each batch of processed mineral was a step forward. The radioactivity of their samples constantly increased. In 1900, they had obtained radium-barium salts whose radioactivity was 1,000 times higher than uranium. In 1901, 5,000 times. In 1902, almost 10,000 times. Finally, after 4 years of exhausting work, in 1902, Marie managed to isolate 1 decigram of pure radium chloride. 1 decigram. 1/10 of a gram. A tiny amount. Almost invisible. But enough. Enough to determine its atomic weight precisely. Enough to study its chemical properties. Enough to prove without doubt that radium was a new element, element number 88 on the periodic table. The atomic weight she determined was 225. The actual value, known today, is 226, but her measurement was extraordinarily precise given the primitive circumstances in which she worked. She had processed more than 8 tons of pitchblende residues. 8 tons that she had to dissolve, precipitate, filter, crystallize, thousands and thousands of times, to obtain 1/10 of a gram of pure radium. It was like extracting a single grain of sugar from a mountain of sand. But she had done it. She had succeeded. In June 1903, Marie Curie defended her doctoral thesis at the Sorbonne. The title was Research on Radioactive Substances. The tribunal was composed of the most distinguished physicists in France. The auditorium was full. It was not common for a woman to defend a doctorate. And it was certainly not common for the doctorate to be about a discovery that would change science forever. Marie presented her findings with clarity and precision. She explained her methods. She showed her data. She answered all questions with absolute authority. The tribunal approved her unanimously with the highest distinction. Marie Curie became the first woman in France to obtain a doctorate in physics. But more importantly, she had proven that radium existed. Radium was extraordinary. Not only for its intense radioactivity, but for its almost magical properties. It glowed in the dark with a soft, beautiful blue-green light. It heated spontaneously. A radium tube was always warmer than the environment, generating heat continuously without fuel, without an external source of energy. It emitted radiation that could pass through paper, wood, even metal. And this radiation had biological effects. It could burn skin. It could kill cells. It could cause wounds that would not heal. Pierre experimented on himself. He tied a radium tube to his arm for 10 hours. He developed a deep burn that took months to heal and left a permanent scar. But instead of being frightened, he became fascinated. If radium could burn healthy skin, could it burn diseased tissue? Could it be used to destroy cancerous tumors? It was a revolutionary idea. And it turned out to be correct. But before they could fully explore the medical applications of radium, before they could fully understand what they had discovered, news of their work spread. The scientific world finally paid attention. The Curies became famous almost overnight. And in 1903 came the announcement that would change their lives. The Nobel Prize in Physics. Except that initially the prize was going to be only for Henri Becquerel and Pierre Curie. Marie was not included. The Nobel Committee, composed entirely of men, had decided that the discovery of radioactivity was Becquerel's, and that the subsequent work was Pierre's. Marie was invisible to them. Just a helping wife. But Pierre found out about this before the public announcement. And he refused. He wrote to the committee explaining unequivocally that Marie had initiated the research on radioactivity, that she had discovered polonium and radium, that she had done the isolation work, that without her there would be no discovery. If Marie was not included, he would reject the prize. The Nobel Committee yielded. In November 1903, they announced that the Nobel Prize in Physics would be shared between Henri Becquerel, Pierre Curie, and Marie Curie. Marie became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. But she was too ill to travel to Stockholm for the ceremony. Both she and Pierre were physically and mentally exhausted. Pierre could barely walk due to chronic pain. Marie suffered from severe anemia, constant fatigue, and a cough that would not improve, They sent a letter of apology and promised to collect the prize later. They finally traveled to Stockholm in 1905 to give the obligatory Nobel lecture. In his speech, Pierre spoke about radium and its extraordinary properties. But he also expressed a prophetic concern. He said that radium in the wrong hands could be dangerous, that radioactivity could be used for good or for evil, that humanity was discovering powers it did not yet fully understand. No one paid much attention to him. It was 1905. The idea that radioactivity could be used as a weapon seemed like science fiction. But Pierre had glimpsed the future. He had glimpsed Hiroshima, though he did not live to see it. The Nobel money was a blessing and a curse. They finally had economic security. Pierre was able to leave his poorly paid position and accept a chair at the Sorbonne. Marie was appointed head of the laboratory. But with fame came unwanted attention. Journalists harassed them. Photographers pursued them. Everyone wanted to know about the scientific marriage, about the woman who had overcome all obstacles, about the miraculous radium. Marie hated public attention. She was intensely private. The idea of being a celebrity horrified her. She just wanted to work in peace. And radium became a worldwide sensation. Suddenly, everyone wanted radium. Pharmaceutical companies began producing radium tonics that supposedly cured everything from arthritis to impotence. They sold facial creams with radium that promised to rejuvenate the skin. Watches with dials painted with radium paint so they would glow in the dark. Toys. Cosmetics. Radium was everywhere. And no one understood the dangers. The Curies could have become immensely wealthy. They could have patented their radium isolation process. They could have controlled world production. But they deliberately chose not to. Pierre and Marie discussed the matter and decided that scientific knowledge should be free. That patenting their process would be contrary to the principles of science. They published their methods in detail so that anyone could replicate them. They answered questions from industrialists who wanted to produce radium commercially. They provided information for free. Their idealism cost them millions. But they maintained their principles. Hospitals began using radium to treat cancer. Curie therapy, as it was called, saved thousands of lives. Doctors inserted radium needles directly into tumors. The radiation destroyed cancer cells. It was not a perfect cure. Radiation also damaged healthy tissue. But for patients with terminal cancer, it offered hope where before there was none. Radium became synonymous with medical progress, with modernity, with the future. But while the world celebrated radium, the Curies suffered its effects. Their hands were perpetually inflamed and cracked. Pierre developed chronic bone pain. Marie suffered from debilitating fatigue. Both had problems with memory and concentration. Their doctors did not know what was wrong with them. Some suspected it was exhaustion from overwork. Others thought it was some mysterious illness. No one connected the symptoms with constant exposure to radiation, because no one yet understood that radiation was cumulatively poisonous, that each exposure added damage upon damage, that their bodies were being destroyed from within, cell by cell, by the very substance they had discovered. The laboratories where they worked were radioactively contaminated. The walls, the tables, the instruments, everything emitted radiation. And they spent 8, 10, 12 hours a day in that environment. They ate in the laboratory. They drank tea in the laboratory. Their lungs inhaled radioactive dust. Their stomachs ingested radioactive particles. Marie carried radium tubes in her pocket. Pierre left them on his desk, fascinated by their nocturnal glow. They did not know. They simply did not know. In 1904, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Eve. The pregnancy was difficult. Marie worked until practically the day of delivery. After the birth, her recovery was slow. But as soon as she could walk, she returned to the laboratory, because there was more to discover, more to understand. Radioactivity had opened a door to a new physics. Ernest Rutherford in England was studying radioactive emissions and discovering that there were different types: alpha, beta, gamma. Other scientists were discovering more radioactive elements. Physics was being revolutionized, and the Curies were at the center of that revolution. Life in Paris was now more comfortable than before. They had a larger apartment. They could afford domestic help. Pierre had a better-equipped laboratory at the Sorbonne. But they were also trapped in a cycle of obligations. Lectures, academic meetings, constant requests from other scientists, journalists who would not leave them alone. Marie hated all of that. She just wanted to work. But fame has a price. And that price was their privacy, their time, their peace. And then, on April 19, 1906, everything changed. It was a rainy day in Paris. Pierre had attended a meeting of the Association of Science Professors. He left around noon. The street was wet. Heavy traffic. Horse-drawn carts. Pedestrians with umbrellas. Pierre tried to cross Rue Dauphine near the Seine. He was distracted, lost in thoughts as always. He did not see the horse-drawn cart coming. The horses struck him. Pierre fell. And before he could move, the rear wheels of the cart, loaded with several hundred kilos of military material, passed over his head. Death was instantaneous. Pierre Curie was 46 years old. The news reached Marie while she was at home. The devastation was absolute. Pierre was not just her husband. He was her collaborator, her confidant, her intellectual companion, the only person in the world who understood her completely, the only person who had treated her as an equal from day one. And now he was dead. Dead in the most stupid, most random, most unfair way possible. Not from his dangerous research. Not from an illness. From a banal traffic accident on a wet street. Marie did not cry publicly. She locked herself in absolute silence. She refused the government pension they offered her. She did not want charity. She did not want pity. In her private diary, which she kept for months after Pierre's death, she wrote, "I entered your room. Everything is disordered, sad. Your books, your papers, your clothes. Everything is as you left it. But you are not here." Pages and pages of raw pain, desperation, absolute loneliness. But publicly she maintained a facade of control. The Sorbonne offered her Pierre's chair. It was an extraordinary honor. No woman had been a professor at the Sorbonne in its 650 years of history. Marie accepted. Not because she wanted the honor, but because she wanted to continue Pierre's work. Because giving up would have been betraying everything they had fought for together. Her first class was on November 24, 1906. The auditorium was packed. Journalists, students, curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the woman professor. The tragic widow. The scientific genius. Marie entered. She stood in front of the blackboard. And she began speaking exactly where Pierre had left off in his last class. Without preamble, without acknowledgement of the historic occasion. As if nothing had changed. As if Pierre had simply been absent. It was her way of honoring him. Continuing. Working. Discovering. The years after Pierre's death were the darkest of Marie's life. She was alone. She had 2 young daughters to raise. She had a laboratory to direct. She had research to complete. She was physically and emotionally exhausted. But she did not give up. She worked harder than ever. As if work was the only thing keeping her sane. As if stopping meant facing the abyss of her grief. And the work continued to bear fruit. Marie continued purifying radium. She studied its properties with greater precision. She established the first international standard of radioactivity. She worked on isolating pure metallic radium, not just its salts. It was extremely difficult work because metallic radium is highly reactive and dangerous. But she succeeded. In 1910, after years of additional effort, she produced a sample of pure metallic radium. An extraordinary chemical feat. In 1911, the Nobel Committee distinguished her again. This time with the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of radium and polonium and for the isolation of pure radium. Marie Curie became the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes. And she remains one of the few people to have achieved it in 2 different sciences. Physics and chemistry. It was an unprecedented recognition of her scientific genius. But even this triumph was tarnished by scandal and misogyny. Just before the announcement of the second Nobel, the French press published stories about an alleged romance between Marie and Paul Langevin, a French physicist who had been Pierre's student and was now Marie's colleague. Langevin was married but separated from his wife. He and Marie were close friends. There may have been something more, historians still debate this. But the French press destroyed her. The headlines were vicious. The widow Curie and free love. A foreigner steals a French husband. Anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and misogyny combined in an unprecedented hate campaign. A mob gathered outside her house shouting insults. They had to hide her daughters. Marie received threatening letters. Some members of the French Academy of Sciences demanded she resign. The Nobel Committee sent her a letter suggesting she not come to Stockholm to collect her prize. Marie responded with fierce dignity. She told them her private life had nothing to do with her scientific work. That she had won the Nobel for her discoveries, not for her virtue. That she would attend the ceremony. And she did. She went to Stockholm, gave her Nobel lecture, received her prize, and returned to France with her head held high. But the scandal affected her deeply. Her health, already fragile, deteriorated even further. She had a nervous breakdown. She spent months resting. Her kidneys began to fail. She had constant fevers. Doctors diagnosed her with chronic kidney infection, but in reality her kidneys were being destroyed by cumulative radiation. Her hands were so damaged she could barely work with delicate equipment. But even from her sickbed, she supervised her laboratory, directed her students, planned experiments. She recovered slowly, but never completely. From 1912 onward, her health would be a constant problem. Chronic fatigue, recurrent infections, kidney problems, cataracts that gradually clouded her vision, all caused by years of radiation exposure. But she still had important work to do. She still had contributions to make. And when World War I broke out in 1914, Marie Curie found a new mission. A mission that would save tens of thousands of lives and demonstrate once again her practical genius and her compassion. August 1914. Europe erupts in flames. World War I begins with a speed and brutality that no one had anticipated. Armies mobilize. Young men march to the front singing patriotic songs, believing the war will be over by Christmas. They have no idea it will last 4 years. They have no idea that millions will die. France mobilizes all its able-bodied men. Cities empty out. And in Paris, Marie Curie observes the chaos with a mixture of horror and determination. She is 46 years old. She is physically and emotionally shattered by Pierre's death, by the Langevin scandal, by decades of radiation exposure. She could retire. She could protect herself. She could take refuge in her laboratory and wait for the nightmare to end. But Marie is not one to hide. Marie has never been one to hide. She sees the problem immediately. Military hospitals are overwhelmed with wounded. Bullets, shrapnel, artillery explosions. Soldiers arrive with horrible wounds, shattered bones, perforated organs. But surgeons work almost blind. They cannot see where the shrapnel is. They cannot locate bullets embedded in the body. They cannot determine the extent of fractures without opening the patient, and each unnecessary exploratory operation increases the risk of infection and death. X-rays could solve all of this. X-rays, discovered by Röntgen in 1895, can reveal bones, metal, bullets, shrapnel fragments, everything invisible to the eye. But there is a massive problem. X-ray machines are in the big city hospitals. The wounded are at the front, in muddy battlefields, in improvised field hospitals. By the time they transport a seriously wounded soldier from the front to a hospital with X-rays in Paris, days may have passed. Days of agony. Days when infection sets in. Days that mark the difference between life and death. Marie has an idea. An idea simple in concept but extraordinarily complex in execution. What if they could bring X-rays to the front? What if they could install X-ray machines in mobile vehicles that could travel to field hospitals? Soldiers could be X-rayed immediately. Surgeons would know exactly where to operate. Thousands of lives would be saved. But no one has done something like this before. X-ray machines are delicate, bulky, require stable electricity. They are not designed to be transported over destroyed roads toward active war zones. Marie is not discouraged by technical obstacles. She never has been. She contacts the Red Cross, the Ministry of War, medical equipment manufacturers. She needs vehicles. She needs X-ray machines. She needs portable electric generators. She needs cables, screens, photographic plates, chemicals to develop the radiographs. And above all, she needs money. She uses her fame. For once in her life, she uses her celebrity for something. She contacts wealthy women, charitable societies, patriots with resources. She explains her plan to them. She shows them how it can save lives. And she gets donations. She gets enough money to equip several vehicles. The first vehicles are basically modified vans. Marie personally works on designing the interior. Every centimeter must be utilized. The X-ray machine is mounted on padded supports to absorb road vibrations. The electric generator goes in a separate compartment to reduce noise and heat. There is space to store photographic plates. There is a small work area where radiographs can be developed on site. It is ingenious. It is practical. And it works. In October 1914, Marie personally drives the first mobile radiological vehicle toward the front. They call it Petite Curie, Little Curie. Marie had never learned to drive. She learns now at 46 years old in the middle of a war. She learns to change tires. She learns basic mechanics because vehicles constantly break down and there are no mechanics available in war zones. She learns to navigate destroyed roads, muddy fields, under occasional artillery fire. And when she arrives at a field hospital, she parks her vehicle, connects the generator, and begins taking X-rays. The first military doctors are skeptical. A woman scientist in the war zone. It seems absurd. But when they see the radiographs, when they see with perfect clarity where the bullet is lodged in a soldier's femur, when they can extract it with surgical precision instead of cutting blindly, they convert. Surgeons line up to use Marie's equipment. The Petites Curies become vital for the military medical operation. Marie trains other women. She recruits nurses, technicians, students. She teaches them to operate X-ray machines. She teaches them basic safety, though ironically, she herself does not follow precautions. She works with bare hands. She exposes herself to massive doses of additional radiation day after day. But she does not care. There are soldiers to save. There is work to do. Her own health is secondary. She also mobilizes her older daughter, Irene. Irene is only 17 when the war begins, but she is brilliant. She has already studied physics and mathematics. Marie trains her in radiology. She sends her to field hospitals to operate X-ray units. Mother and daughter work on different fronts, saving lives, exposing their bodies to dangerous radiation, risking their lives in war zones. It is extraordinary. It is heroic. And it is completely consistent with Marie's character. Personal sacrifice has never been an obstacle for her. For 4 years, Marie and her team of radiological technicians worked tirelessly. They equipped 20 mobile vehicles. They installed 200 fixed X-ray units in field hospitals. They train 150 technicians. And they perform more than 1 million radiographs. 1 million. That is 1 million soldiers whose wounds were accurately diagnosed. 1 million times that a surgeon knew exactly where to cut. It is impossible to calculate how many lives they saved, but estimates range from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. Marie Curie, the theoretical scientist, the discoverer of radium, also became a practical savior of human lives in the worst war humanity had seen up to that point. But the work is exhausting. The roads are dangerous. Food is scarce. Accommodation is primitive. Marie sleeps in tents. She eats military rations. She works 14-16 hours a day. Her hands, already damaged by years of work with radium, crack and bleed from the cold and constant work. Her cough worsens. She has recurring fevers. But she does not stop. She cannot stop. There are too many wounded. Too much need. And she is the only one who knows how to make this work. When the war finally ends in November 1918, Europe is devastated. 10 million soldiers dead. Millions more maimed. Cities destroyed. Economies ruined. A lost generation. But France has won. Anne-Marie has contributed in a way that no one else could have. However, she receives no official recognition, no medals, no ceremonies. French military authorities simply ignore her contributions, because she is a woman, because she is a foreigner, because recognizing her would be admitting they needed help from someone who does not fit their categories of appropriate hero. Marie does not seek recognition anyway. She returns to Paris. She returns to her laboratory. She is physically destroyed. She is 51 years old but looks much older. Her hair has gone completely gray. Her face is gaunt. Her hands tremble constantly. She has cataracts clouding her vision. Her kidneys function poorly. She has chronic anemia. Doctors tell her she needs to rest. She ignores them. She has work to do. The war has interrupted science for 4 years. Marie needs to rebuild. The Radium Institute, which had been established before the war thanks to private donations and government funding, needs to be completed and equipped. Marie has a vision. She wants to create a world-class research center dedicated to radioactivity, to nuclear physics, and especially to medical applications of radium. She wants to train the next generation of scientists. She wants to ensure that the knowledge she and Pierre discovered is used for the good of humanity. But there is a practical and painful problem. Marie does not have enough radium to adequately equip her institute. Radium has become extremely valuable. 1 gram of radium costs more than $100,000 in 1920, an absolute fortune. Marie has donated most of the radium she personally isolated during years of exhausting work. She has given it to hospitals for cancer treatments. She has lent it to other researchers. Because for Marie, knowledge and healing are more important than personal possession. But now her institute needs radium for research and she cannot afford to buy it. In 1920, an American journalist named Marie Maloney travels to Paris to interview Marie Curie. Maloney expects to find a scientific celebrity living in luxury thanks to her fame and discoveries. What she finds is a 53-year-old woman living in a modest apartment, wearing simple, old clothes, working in a barely equipped laboratory, without sufficient resources for her research. Maloney is astonished. How is it possible that the woman who discovered radium, whose discovery has generated millions in industries and medical treatments, does not have enough radium for her own work? Marie explains calmly that she never patented her methods, that she deliberately published all her research so others could benefit. That knowledge must be free. Maloney returns to the United States with a mission. She launches a fundraising campaign. She appeals to American women. She tells them Marie Curie's story. The poor immigrant who overcame all obstacles. The brilliant scientist. The widowed mother. The war heroine. The woman who gave her discoveries to the world and now needs help. The campaign is successful. American women donate. Small amounts. Large amounts. Pennies. Dollars. Thousands of dollars. And finally they gather enough to buy 1 gram of pure radium. 1 gram. Worth more than a house. In 1921, Marie travels to the United States to receive the gift. It is her first trip to America. The reception is extraordinary. Crowds wait for her at the port of New York. Reporters, photographers, fans. They treat her like a movie star. Marie hates the attention but endures it because she is doing this for her institute. She tours the country. She visits universities. She gives lectures. She meets presidents. And at the White House, President Warren Harding personally presents her with a small box containing 1 gram of radium. It is worth $150,000. It is a gift from the American people. Marie accepts gratefully. But she is exhausted. The trip is draining. The crowds, the social events, the speeches, everything drains her. Her doctors accompany her because her health is so fragile they fear a collapse. And in fact, she has to cancel several events because she simply cannot continue. But she gets her radium. She returns to France. And she can finally fully equip her institute. The Radium Institute of Paris becomes one of the most important research centers in the world. Marie directs the laboratory. Her daughter Irene works there too. Irene has grown up to become a brilliant scientist in her own right. Mother and daughter work side by side, continuing research on radioactivity, training students, making new discoveries. During the 20s, Marie receives honor after honor. Universities around the world award her honorary doctorates. She is elected to the Academy of Medicine. She is invited to international conferences. Young scientists travel to Paris to study with her. But Marie does not change. She remains modest. She continues working with the same intensity. She continues wearing simple clothes. She continues dedicating her life to science. But her body finally begins to give out. The cataracts in her eyes worsen so much she needs multiple surgeries. The operations are only partially successful. Her vision never fully recovers. Her kidneys progressively fail. She has constant infections. Doctors diagnose pernicious aplastic anemia, a condition where the bone marrow stops producing enough blood cells. They do not understand the cause. But the cause is obvious in retrospect. Decades of radiation exposure have destroyed her bone marrow. They have devastated her immune system. They have damaged every cell in her body. Marie knows it, or at least suspects it. By then, early 30s, the dangers of radiation are better understood. Workers in factories painting watch dials with radium paint have died. The radium girls, as the press called them. Young women who worked painting numbers on watches so they would glow in the dark. They were told radium paint was harmless. They were trained to sharpen their brushes by licking them with their tongue. Each time they licked the brush, they ingested a small amount of radium, and the radium accumulated in their bones. They began to get sick. Their jaws disintegrated. Their teeth fell out. They developed horrible cancers. Many died young, agonizing deaths. Their legal cases against the watch companies eventually established important precedents for occupational safety. But that came late. Too late for them. Marie observes these cases with horror and some guilt. She discovered radium. She promoted it. She said it was wonderful. And now young women are dying from it. It is true that she could not have known the dangers in 1898. Radioactivity was completely new. No one understood its biological effects. But now in the 30s the evidence is clear. Anne-Marie herself is a victim. Her own body is proof that radium is both savior and killer. Her laboratory notebooks, which she wrote during years of experiments with radium, are so contaminated with radiation that even today, almost 90 years after her death, they must be stored in lead-lined boxes. If you want to consult them, you must go to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. You must sign a waiver. You must wear protective gloves. You must limit your exposure time. Because the pages themselves emit radiation. They will continue to be radioactive for centuries, millennia. It is a strange legacy, beautiful and terrifying. Those notebooks contain the map of one of the most important discoveries in history. But they also contain poison. They are knowledge and danger fused inseparably. They are exactly like radium itself. Brilliant, revealing, lethal. Marie understands this better than anyone, and in her final years she becomes more cautious. Not with her own safety, it is too late for that, but with her students, with her laboratory workers. She implements safety protocols. She insists they use tongs to handle radioactive materials, that they wash their hands frequently, that they not eat or drink in the laboratory, that they monitor their exposure. These are basic measures. They should have been implemented from the beginning. But in 1900 no one knew. In 1930 they do know. Anne-Marie does what she can to protect the next generation of scientists from the fate she herself has suffered. Her daughter Irene is a source of pride and concern. Irene has followed in her mother's footsteps. She is a brilliant physicist. She works with radioactive materials. She has made important discoveries. She will win the Nobel Prize in 1935. But she is also exposing her body to radiation. She is repeating her mother's pattern. Marie sees it. She understands it. But what can she do? Tell Irene to stop doing science? To abandon her career to protect her health? It would be hypocritical. Marie never did that. Why would she expect her daughter to? So she watches. She worries silently. And she hopes Irene takes more precautions than she herself took. In 1933, Marie attends a scientific conference in Brussels. It is the 7th Solvay Conference. A meeting of the world's most important physicists. Einstein is there. Or Heisenberg, Pauli, Dirac. The architects of quantum mechanics, the new physics that has revolutionized our understanding of the atom. Marie listens to them talk about wave functions, uncertainty principles, wave-particle duality. It is abstract physics, mathematical, very far removed from the brutal chemical work she did to isolate radium 30 years before. But it is also physics that would not have been possible without her work. Without the discovery that atoms have internal structure, that they emit radiation, that they transform spontaneously. The Curies provided crucial experimental evidence that quantum theory needed. They opened the way. During the conference, the young physicists treat Marie with reverence, with respect, but also with a certain distance. She is a figure from the past, a pioneer, a founder, but physics has advanced beyond her work. She is no longer at the forefront. She is no longer making the most revolutionary discoveries. It is a painful transition for any scientist, to go from being the discoverer to being history. But Marie accepts it with grace. She listens to the presentations. She asks intelligent questions. And at night in her hotel room, she probably reflects on how science advances, how each generation builds on the previous one, how her work, monumental as it may be, is only one step on an infinite ladder toward understanding. The winter of 1933 to 1934 is particularly difficult. Marie has recurring fevers, chills, extreme weakness. Doctors diagnose flu, bronchitis. But it is more than that. Her immune system is so compromised that any infection is potentially fatal. Her body cannot fight diseases like before. In March 1934, she contracts another infection, this time in her lungs. She has difficulty breathing, constant coughing, high fever. Doctors prescribe rest. Antibiotics do not exist yet. There is no effective treatment. She can only rest and hope her body recovers. But her body is exhausted. It has fought for decades. It no longer has reserves. In May 1934, Marie is so ill she can no longer work. She can no longer get out of bed most days. Eve, her younger daughter, is with her constantly. Irene comes when she can, but she has her own family, her own laboratory. Marie insists that Irene continue working. She does not want to be a burden. She does not want her illness to stop science. It is characteristic. Even dying, she thinks first of the work. Doctors recommend mountain air. It was a common treatment for lung diseases at that time. The idea was that fresh, clean air would help the lungs heal. So on May 30, 1934, Marie is transported to the Saint-Célimas Sanatorium in Passy in the French Alps. It is a beautiful place, surrounded by mountains, pure air, silence. Marie has a room with a view of the mountains. She can see the snow-covered peaks, the green forest, the blue sky. It is tranquil, serene. A marked contrast to the damp, dark shed where she spent years processing pitchblende, with the field hospitals where she worked during the war, with the laboratories filled with bubbling tubes and chemical vapors. Here there is only silence, nature, beauty. But beauty cannot save her. Her condition deteriorates. The fever increases. She has hallucinations. She says things without sense. Doctors take blood samples. They analyze them. The results are devastating. Her red blood cell count is catastrophically low. Her white blood cell count too. Her bone marrow has almost completely stopped functioning. It is aplastic anemia in its most severe form. It is a death sentence. And everyone knows it. Marie probably knows it too in her lucid moments. Eve is with her. She reads to her. She talks to her. She holds her hand. Marie sleeps a lot. When she is awake, she sometimes talks about Pierre, about their work together, about the shed, about the nights when they returned to the laboratory after dinner and watched the radium tubes glowing in the darkness. They were beautiful, she says. So beautiful. It is one of her last coherent memories. The glow of radium, the substance she discovered, the substance that killed her. And she remembers it as beautiful, because it was. Because despite everything, despite the pain and suffering and death, It was a magnificent discovery. It was knowledge. It was truth. And for Marie, that was always the most important thing. On July 4, 1934, at 9 in the morning, Marie Curie dies. She is 66 years old. The official cause of death is aplastic pernicious anemia of rapid development, febrile. But the real cause is radiation poisoning. Decades of exposure to radioactive materials have destroyed her bone marrow. They have compromised her immune system. They have killed her cells one by one. It is a slow death, painful. But in the end it is peaceful. Marie simply falls asleep and does not wake up. The funeral is private, small. Only family and close friends. There are no state ceremonies. No crowds. Marie would have wanted it this way. She is buried in Sceaux, a suburb of Paris, in the same grave where Pierre has been since 1906. 28 years separated in life. Now together again. Marie's coffin is placed directly over Pierre's. It is symbolic, appropriate. They were together in science, together in life, and now together in death. But there is a macabre detail that funeral attendees do not know. Marie's coffin is lined with lead, a thick layer, because her body is radioactive. The radium she absorbed during decades has been incorporated into her bones, and it will remain there, emitting radiation, for centuries. Radium has a half-life of 1600 years. That means that in 1600 years, only half the radium in Marie's bones will have decayed. Her body will be literally radioactive longer than human civilization has existed since the pyramids of Egypt. It is an involuntary monument, a permanent reminder of the power she unleashed, of the price she paid. The obituaries are respectful. They speak of her brilliance, her discoveries, her 2 Nobel Prizes, her valor during the war. But they underestimate her importance. They cannot see, not yet, how profoundly she has changed the world. How her work will eventually lead to the atomic bomb, to nuclear reactors, to modern nuclear medicine, to a completely new understanding of matter and energy. In 1934, this is still future, still potential. The obituaries see Marie Curie as a great scientist. They cannot see that she is one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. That her discovery will divide human history into before and after. Before understanding the atom. After understanding the atom. Irene continues her mother's work. She makes her own revolutionary discovery, artificial radioactivity. She wins the Nobel Prize in 1935. Marie does not live to see it, but she would have been immensely proud. The Curie dynasty continues. But Irene also pays the price. She works with radioactive materials all her life. And in 1956, at 58 years old, she dies of leukemia, caused by radiation exposure. Mother and daughter, both brilliant, both Nobel winners, both killed by their own work. It is a tragedy. But it is also, in a certain twisted way, consistent. They dedicated their lives to knowledge. And knowledge killed them. They did not regret it. Neither of them. Knowledge was worth the price. Eve, the younger daughter who chose not to be a scientist, lives until 2007. 102 years. She writes the definitive biography of her mother. She becomes an activist, journalist, diplomat. She has a long and full life. And she never works with radiation. The lesson is clear. But it is also uncomfortable. Did Eve have a better life because she avoided science? Or simply a longer life? Is the length of life more important than contribution? How much is a life of discovery worth against a life of longevity? There is no right answer. Only personal preferences, different values. In the years after Marie's death, the world begins to truly understand what she discovered. Nuclear physics advances rapidly. In 1938, nuclear fission is discovered. In 1942, the first nuclear reactor goes into operation. In 1945, atomic bombs destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All of this is a direct descendant of Marie's work. She opened the door. Others walked through it. But without that first door, none of this would have been possible. Not at that time. Perhaps never. Would Marie have approved of the atomic bomb? We will never know. She died 11 years before. But we can speculate. Pierre warned in 1905 that radium could be dangerous in the wrong hands, that humanity was discovering powers it did not yet fully understand. Marie surely shared that concern. But she also believed deeply in the pursuit of knowledge, that scientists could not stop investigating out of fear of consequences, that knowledge itself was neutral. Applications could be good or bad, but knowledge was just knowledge. She would probably have been horrified by Hiroshima, by the deaths, by the destruction. But she would also have understood that once knowledge exists, it cannot unexist. That the bomb was an inevitable consequence of understanding nuclear fission. That you cannot discover how to split the atom without also discovering how to make a bomb. Knowledge and its applications are intertwined, inseparable. This is the question that haunts Marie Curie's legacy. Should we seek knowledge even if that knowledge is dangerous? Even if it can destroy us? It is the most important question of the scientific age. And it has no easy answer. We could say yes, that knowledge is always worthwhile. That understanding the universe is intrinsically valuable. That the benefits of scientific progress outweigh the risks. And there is evidence for that. Modern medicine has saved millions of lives. Technology has improved the standard of living globally. Scientific knowledge has liberated humanity from superstitions, irrational fears, limitations that once seemed absolute. We live longer, healthier, more comfortably than any previous generation. And that is thanks to science. Thanks to people like Marie Curie who sought knowledge regardless of personal cost. But we could also say no. That there are limits. That some knowledge is too dangerous. That we have discovered powers we cannot control. That the atomic bomb, climate change, pandemics created in laboratories, artificial intelligence that could surpass us, all these are examples of knowledge we perhaps should not have sought. Or at least not so quickly. Not without first thinking about consequences. Without developing the moral wisdom to accompany technological power. Knowledge advances faster than ethics. Science progresses faster than human maturity. And that gap is dangerous. Potentially fatal. Marie Curie embodies this tension. Her life is an argument for the relentless pursuit of knowledge. She overcame impossible obstacles. She discovered truths no one else had seen. She transformed our understanding of the universe. She saved countless lives. She inspired generations of scientists. She demonstrated that human intellect can transcend social, economic, physical limitations. She is heroic. She is inspiring. She is a triumph of the human spirit. But her life is also a warning. Knowledge has cost. Sometimes terrible cost. Marie paid with her health. With her life. The Radium Girls paid with their lives. The victims of Hiroshima paid with their lives. We live under the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. We manage radioactive waste that will remain dangerous for thousands of years. We have unleashed forces we can barely control. And it all began with a woman in a shed processing mineral. With pure curiosity. With hunger to understand. So what is the final verdict on Marie Curie? Heroine or warning? Triumph or tragedy? The answer is both. Always both. Because human reality is complex. There are no simple narratives. No easy judgments. Marie Curie was a brilliant scientist who made fundamental discoveries. She was also a woman who suffered terribly. Who paid a brutal price for her knowledge. Who opened doors that perhaps should not have been opened. Or perhaps should have. We do not know. We cannot know. We can only live with the consequences. And the consequences are enormous. Every time someone receives radiation therapy treatment for cancer, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time you turn on a light powered by nuclear energy, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time an archaeologist dates an artifact with carbon-14, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time you look at the night sky and know that stars function by nuclear fusion, it is thanks to Marie Curie. She did not do all these things directly. But she made possible the knowledge that made them possible. She opened the path. She showed that the atom has secrets. And those secrets have transformed absolutely everything. But also, every nuclear weapon that exists because Marie Curie discovered that atoms are not immutable. Every nuclear disaster, every nuclear plant worker who develops cancer, every community contaminated with radioactive waste, all these are descendants of her discovery. It is not her fault. She had no intention of creating weapons. She could not foresee the consequences. But neither can she be completely separated from those consequences. Knowledge does not exist in a vacuum. It has effects, and the effects are both good and bad. Always. There is an image that summarizes everything. It is imaginary but powerful. Marie Curie standing in her dark shed in 1902. She is holding a small tube containing pure radium. The tube glows with a soft blue-green light. Beautiful. Mysterious. Marie observes it with wonder, with curiosity, with joy. In her eyes there is pure marvel. This is the moment of discovery, the moment where the invisible becomes visible, where mystery reveals itself, where the universe shares one of its secrets. It is a moment of absolute triumph, of pure scientific joy. But if we could see the future, if we could see everything that will come from that glowing tube, we would see a very different image. We would see Hiroshima. We would see Chernobyl. We would see the radium girls dying in agony. We would see Marie's own body destroyed by radiation. But we would also see hospitals saving lives. We would see cities illuminated by nuclear energy. We would see scientific discoveries that would not have been possible without understanding radioactivity. We would see everything, the good and the evil, mixed, inseparable. Anne-Marie, standing in her shed, sees none of that. She only sees the glow. She only feels the joy of discovery. She only knows she has found something new, something important. And it is enough. For her, in that moment, it is enough. Knowledge justifies everything. The price does not matter. The future does not matter. Only truth matters. Only understanding matters. That is Marie Curie's lesson. Or perhaps the question she leaves us. Is knowledge enough? Does it justify the costs? Is it worth the price? Each person must answer for themselves. Each generation must decide. Each scientist who begins a new project, who explores a new field, who asks a question no one has asked before, must consider. What am I unleashing? What consequences will my discovery have? Am I prepared to live with those consequences? Marie never asked herself those questions. Or if she did, she decided that knowledge was more important. That understanding the universe was the highest imperative. That scientists must seek truth no matter where it leads them. It is a respectable position, noble even, but it is also dangerous, because truth is not always benevolent. Knowledge is not always safe. And curiosity, wonderful as it is, can kill you. Radium illuminated the world, literally and metaphorically. It revealed secrets of the atom, transformed medicine, it changed physics, it opened the nuclear age, but it also burned, killed, poisoned, threatened. It is the perfect symbol of human progress. Light and darkness, healing and destruction, hope and danger, all in a glowing tube, all inseparable, all consequence of a simple question. Why does uranium emit this strange radiation? That question, asked by a poor woman in a cold shed, changed the world forever. For better and for worse. Inextricably. And there is the final truth. Progress is not born from power. It is not born from wealth. It is not born from privilege. It is born from hunger. From the hunger to understand. From the hunger to know. From the hunger to see what no one else has seen. Marie Curie had that hunger. Literally hungry in her youth, malnourished and freezing in her Parisian attic. But also metaphorically hungry. Hungry for knowledge. Hungry for truth. Hungry to understand the universe. And that hunger took her to heights no one had reached. But it also took her to her death. It consumed her. Like fire consumes. Like radium emits. Constantly. Inexorably. Until nothing remains except the glow. That glow remains. In hospitals where radiation therapy saves lives. In reactors that generate electricity. In laboratories where scientists continue exploring the atom. In textbooks where students learn about radioactivity. In the periodic table where polonium and radium bear the names Marie gave them. In the Pantheon of Paris where her body rests, still radioactive, still glowing invisibly in her lead coffin. The glow remains. Beautiful, dangerous, eternal. And the question remains. The question Marie Curie left us. What do we do with the fire we stole from the gods? How do we use the power we discover? Can we be wise enough to handle what we learn? Or are we doomed to burn ourselves with our own curiosity? We do not have the answer. Perhaps we never will. But the question itself is Marie Curie's true legacy. Not the radium. Not the Nobel Prizes. Not the fame. The question. Glowing in the darkness of our uncertain future. Illuminating. Warning. Challenging us to be better. To be wiser. To understand that knowledge without wisdom is fire without control. And fire can warm or burn. Build or destroy. Save or kill. The choice as always is ours. Marie gave us the tools. Now we must decide what we build with them. And as long as humanity exists, as long as we seek to understand, as long as we hunger for knowledge, that choice will remain. Eternal. Inevitable. Human. Like Marie. Like radium. Like progress itself. Glowing in the darkness. Beautiful and terrible. Hope and danger. Light and shadow. Life and death. All mixed. All inseparable. All ours. The discovery of radium was not an isolated scientific event. It was an earthquake that shook all of civilization. Imagine the world in 1898. Electricity is still a novelty. Automobiles are just beginning to appear on the streets. There are no airplanes. No antibiotics. No plastics. Physics seems to be almost complete, with only some minor details to be solved. And then the Curies arrive with impossible news. There exists an element that emits energy spontaneously, without an external source, without fuel, without apparent end. An element that glows in the dark. That generates heat from nothing. That emits invisible rays capable of passing through solid matter. It is like announcing you have discovered real magic. Except it is not magic. It is science. It is real. And it will change absolutely everything. The first to recognize the revolutionary potential of radium were the doctors. In 1901, barely 3 years after the announcement of the discovery, Pierre Curie partners with a French doctor named Henri Danlos to investigate the biological effects of radium. The experiments are simple but revealing. They expose living tissue to radium radiation. They observe that cells die, particularly cells that divide rapidly. And then they make the crucial connection. Cancer cells divide rapidly. More rapidly than normal cells. If radium kills cells that divide fast, then radium could kill cancerous tumors selectively. It is a brilliant logical leap. And it works. The first treatments are rudimentary. Crude. They tie radium tubes near superficial tumors. The results are astonishing and terrifying. Tumors shrink. Sometimes they disappear completely. It is the first time in human history that cancer can be effectively treated. It does not always work. Side effects are severe. Radiation burns healthy skin around the tumor. Patients suffer. But for someone with terminal cancer with months to live, any hope is better than no hope. Hospitals begin establishing radiology departments. Paris, London, New York, Berlin, Vienna. In 1903, the first hospital specializing in radium cancer treatment is founded in London. It is called the Radium Institute. Dozens of similar institutions spring up in Europe and America in the following years. The demand for radium explodes. But radium is extraordinarily rare. 1 ton of pitchblende contains only a few decigrams of radium. The isolation process is laborious, requires months of intense chemical work. The result is that radium becomes the most expensive substance in the world. In 1903, 1 gram of radium costs approximately 100,000 French francs. For context, that is the annual salary of several workers. It is more expensive than gold. More expensive than diamonds. Only the wealthiest hospitals can afford to buy sufficient quantities for treatments. And that creates a terrible moral problem. Radium can save lives. But only the lives of those who can pay for it. The poor die of cancer because they cannot afford treatment. It is unfair. Brutally unfair. But it is the reality of medical progress in a capitalist economy. Marie and Pierre observed this with growing frustration. They discovered radium. They could have patented it. They could control its production. They could be making fortunes. But they deliberately published their methods freely so anyone could produce radium. They thought that would democratize access. They did not anticipate that the inherent cost of the process and the scarcity of the mineral would create a de facto monopoly anyway. The companies that can afford to process tons of pitchblende control the radium supply. They set prices. They obtain enormous profits. And the Curies who made all of this possible remain relatively poor. It is ironic, bitter, but also consistent with their principles. Knowledge must be free, even if that means others benefit economically more than the discoverers. But medicine is only the beginning. Industry sees radium and sees opportunities. Opportunities everywhere. Radium glows in the dark. Why not use it to make watches that can be read at night? Watch companies begin hiring painters to paint numbers on watch faces with paint mixed with radium. The watches become immensely popular. Soldiers buy them. Pilots need them. Anyone working at night wants one. It is convenient. It is modern. It is the future. And the companies make millions. Radium becomes synonymous with health, vitality, modernity. Advertisers exploit it mercilessly. Unscrupulous entrepreneurs begin selling radium tonics that supposedly cure everything. Arthritis, impotence, fatigue, depression, cancer. Ironically, though radium actually causes cancer if ingested. But no one knows that yet. They sell radioactive water. Radithor, one of the most famous products, is called. It is literally distilled water with dissolved radium salts. The advertisements promise rejuvenation, energy, virility. It costs a fortune, and people buy it. They drink it daily, for years, accumulating radium in their bones, slowly poisoning themselves without knowing it. They sell facial creams with radium, though Radia, a popular French brand, is called. It promises to eliminate wrinkles, smooth skin, restore youth. Women apply it to their faces every day. Radium emits alpha radiation. Alpha particles do not penetrate very deep into skin, but they cause cellular damage where they impact. Some women develop lesions, burns, scars, but symptoms are slow to appear. And meanwhile, companies make money. There are radium chocolates, radium cigarettes, radium soaps, radium toothpaste, radium suppositories. Yes, suppositories. To stimulate vitality. It is insanity. It is dangerous. But it is the radium boom. It is the radioactive gold rush. And like all gold rushes, it will leave bodies in its wake. Watch factories are where the horror manifests first. In the United States, companies like United States Radium Corporation hire hundreds of young women to paint watch faces. The work requires precision. Numbers must be small, clear, uniform. The painters use fine brushes. So fine they only have a few hairs. And here is the problem. Brushes constantly lose their point. They fray. To work with precision, painters need to keep the point sharp. How do they do it? Supervisors teach them a technique. They put the brush in their mouth. They roll it between their lips. They moisten it with their tongue. Lip dip paint, they say. Lips dip paint. It is the most efficient method. It keeps brushes sharp. It allows them to work quickly. The painters are paid by the piece, so working fast means earning more money. Each time they lick the brush, they ingest a microscopic amount of radium paint. An amount so small it is invisible, imperceptible. But it accumulates. Radium is chemically similar to calcium. The human body cannot distinguish them. When you ingest radium, your body treats it like calcium. It incorporates it into your bones. And there it stays, emitting radiation. Constantly. Alpha particles hit bone marrow cells. They cause mutations. They destroy DNA. Cancer cells begin to proliferate. The painters do not know this. The companies tell them the paint is harmless. Some painters have fun with it. They paint their nails with radium paint so they glow in the dark. They paint their teeth. Some even paint their lips to surprise their boyfriends with glowing kisses. It is naive. It is tragic. It is what happens when corporate greed meets scientific ignorance. Symptoms begin years later. First, dental problems. Bang. Teeth that loosen. Gums that bleed. Dentists extract teeth, but the holes do not heal. Jaws begin to necrotize. The condition is called radium jaw. The bone literally disintegrates. It becomes porous, fragile. In some cases, entire parts of the jaw fall off. The women suffer constant pain, recurrent infections, and then come the cancers, bone sarcomas, tumors in the bones of the jaw, the skull, the legs, severe anemias because bone marrow is destroyed, and they die, young, horribly, slowly. One of the first famous victims is Grace Fryer. She worked for United States Radium Corporation from 1917 to 1921. In 1922, she begins having problems. Back pain, teeth falling out. By 1925, she is so ill she can barely walk. She consults doctors, dentists, specialists. No one can diagnose her with certainty. Some suggest syphilis, which is a terrible stigma. Others speak of mysterious arthritis. Finally, in 1925, a specialist makes the connection. He has read about the effects of radium. He examines Grace with an electroscope, a device for detecting radiation, and he discovers that her entire body emits radiation. Her bones, her breath, even her clothes. She is radioactive. Radium has infiltrated her skeleton and is killing her from the inside. Grace seeks justice. She wants to sue the company. But she has a problem. Finding a lawyer is difficult. Radium companies are powerful. They have money. They have influence. Lawyers are afraid to confront them. Finally, Grace finds Raymond Berry, a young lawyer willing to take the case. He recruits other victims. Catherine Donahue, Edna Hussman, Quinta Maggia McDonald, Albina Maggia. They become the Radium Girls. The press calls them that. Young women, some barely in their 20s, dying slowly from radiation poisoning. It is a national scandal. The trial is brutal. The companies deny everything. They say the paint is safe, that they have done studies, that radium is harmless in small amounts. They hire scientists to testify on their behalf. Some scientists cooperate either for money or genuine ignorance. It is hard to distinguish. The science of radiation is still new. Long-term effects are not completely understood, but the evidence is overwhelming. Women who worked painting radium are dying. Women who did not work with radium do not have these symptoms. The correlation is obvious. But companies delay. They appeal. They use legal tactics to prolong the case. They hope victims die before trial. Some do die. Finally, in 1928, companies agree to an out-of-court settlement. They pay each survivor $10,000, plus $600 annually as long as they live, and they will cover all medical expenses. Sounds generous, but it is not, because most victims die within a few years. Some die before receiving a single annual payment. Companies calculated costs. They decided paying was cheaper than continuing to fight in courts. They admitted no guilt. They did not apologize. They just paid money to make the problem go away. But the Radium Girls case has an enormous impact. It establishes important legal precedents about occupational safety. It establishes that companies are responsible for their workers' health. That workers have the right to know about the dangers of materials they handle. That companies cannot simply say something is safe without evidence. These ideas seem obvious now, but in 1920 they were revolutionary. The Radium Girls case is one of the foundations of the modern occupational health movement. Those women died, but their death was not in vain. They saved future lives. They protected future workers. They changed laws. It is small consolation, but it is something. Marie Curie observes the case with horror and guilt. She discovered radium. She said it was wonderful. She herself handled it without protection for years. Is she responsible for the Radium Girls' deaths? Not directly. She did not tell them to lick the brushes. She did not work for United States Radium Corporation. She did not hide radium's dangers because in 1898, when she discovered it, no one knew the dangers. But still, guilt gnaws at her. In her final years, she occasionally speaks about the need for precautions when handling radioactive materials. But she does it discreetly. She does not want to damage radium's reputation in medicine, where it is saving lives. She does not want to stop scientific research. It is an impossible balance. And finally, she remains mostly silent. Because what can she say? The genie is out of the bottle. Radium is in the world. And it cannot go back. While the radium girls die in America, Europe marches toward another war. World War I ended in 1918, but it solved nothing. It only planted seeds for an even worse conflict. In the 30s, Hitler rises to power in Germany. Mussolini controls Italy. Stalin governs the Soviet Union with an iron fist. The world polarizes, militarizes, prepares for a war that will be even more terrible than the previous one. And in Europe's laboratories, scientists make discoveries that will change the very nature of war. In 1932, James Chadwick discovers the neutron. It is a particle without electric charge that exists in the atomic nucleus along with protons. This discovery is crucial because neutrons can easily penetrate atomic nuclei. They are not repelled by electrical forces. They are perfect bullets for bombarding atoms. In 1934, Irene Joliot-Curie and her husband Frederick discover artificial radioactivity. They demonstrate they can make normally stable elements become radioactive by bombarding them with particles. In 1938, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann in Germany perform experiments bombarding uranium with neutrons. They expect to produce heavier elements. What they discover is completely unexpected. The uranium nucleus splits, efficients, and it releases energy. A lot of energy. Lise Meitner, an Austrian Jewish physicist who had collaborated with Hahn but who fled Germany when the Nazis took power, interprets the results correctly. Uranium is splitting. And when it splits, it releases not only energy but also additional neutrons. And those neutrons can cause other uranium atoms to fission. And those will produce more neutrons. It is a chain reaction. Theoretically, if you have enough uranium in the right space, you could have a sustained chain reaction. Releasing energy continuously, or releasing all the energy at once. In an explosion, scientists understand the implications immediately. A bomb based on nuclear fission would be millions of times more powerful than any conventional explosive. A single bomb could destroy an entire city. It is terrifying. And it is possible. The physics is clear. The engineering will be difficult. But it is possible. And it is 1939. Europe is on the brink of war. Hitler has invaded Poland. England and France have declared war on Germany. The United States is still neutral but probably not for long. And Germany has the best physicist, Heisenberg, on. Several Nobel Prize winners. If anyone can build an atomic bomb, it is Germany. And if Germany builds an atomic bomb first, it will win the war. It will dominate the world. It is a nightmare. Refugee physicists, many of them Jews who fled Europe, understand the danger. Leo Szilard, Eugene Wigner, Edward Teller. They convince Albert Einstein, the world's most famous scientist, to write a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt. The letter warns that Germany might be developing atomic bombs. It urges the United States to begin its own research program. Roosevelt takes the letter seriously. He authorizes preliminary research. But the real effort does not begin until after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The United States enters the war. And suddenly, developing an atomic bomb becomes an absolute national priority. The Manhattan Project is officially born in 1942. It is the largest and most expensive scientific project in history up to that point. It employs 130,000 people. It costs $2 billion, equivalent to more than $20 billion today. They build entire cities in secret. Oak Ridge in Tennessee, Hanford in Washington, Los Alamos in New Mexico. They recruit the best scientists from America and Europe. Robert Oppenheimer directs the Los Alamos Laboratory. Enrico Fermi builds the first nuclear reactor in Chicago in 1942, demonstrating that a controlled chain reaction is possible. It is basic science. It is brilliant engineering. It is a desperate race against Germany. And it is all possible because Marie Curie discovered radium 44 years earlier. Because she revealed that atoms are not immutable. that they contain energy, that energy can be released. Marie died in 1934, 11 years before Hiroshima. She never knew her work would lead to the atomic bomb. She probably would have been horrified. But also, perhaps, she would have understood. She knew scientific knowledge is neutral, that it can be used for good or evil. Pierre said it in his Nobel speech in 1905. Radium can be beneficial or it can be dangerous. It depends on how it is used. Nuclear fission is the same. It can generate electricity. It can destroy cities. It depends on us. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber called Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima, Japan. The bomb is called Little Boy. It uses uranium-235. The explosion releases energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The temperature at the explosion center reaches millions of degrees. The pressure generates winds of 1,000 kilometers per hour. Everything within a 1-kilometer radius is vaporized instantly. Buildings, trees, people. They simply disappear. Converted to plasma. Further away, the shock wave destroys buildings, tears up trees, launches debris like projectiles. Massive fires break out throughout the city. And then comes the radiation. Gamma rays, neutrons, particles that penetrate the body, that destroy DNA, that cause immediate death in high doses or cancer and slow death in lower doses. 70,000 people die instantly. Another 70,000 will die in the following months from burns, radiation, disease. The city is destroyed. 3 days later, the United States drops a second bomb on Nagasaki. This one uses plutonium-239. 40,000 additional dead. Japan surrenders on August 15th. The war ends. But the nuclear age has begun. The world awakens to a new reality. Humanity now possesses the power to destroy itself. Completely. Totally. If there are enough nuclear bombs, if there is enough will to use them, civilization can end. Not in decades. Not in years. In hours. It is a fundamental change in the human condition. Throughout all history, war was terrible but survivable. Civilizations fell but humanity continued. Now, for the first time, we have weapons that could end everything. And those weapons are direct daughters of Marie Curie's discovery. Without her work on radioactivity, without the Curies revealing that the atom has internal structure, without decades of nuclear physics research that built on their foundations, the atomic bomb would not have been possible. Not in 1945. Perhaps never. Is it Marie's fault? Is it Pierre's fault? Becquerel's? Rutherford's? All the scientists who studied the atom? No. And yes. No, because they had no intention of creating weapons. They sought pure knowledge. They wanted to understand how the universe works. Their motivation was curiosity, not destruction. But yes, because knowledge has consequences. Discovering how things work is discovering how to manipulate them. And manipulation can be constructive or destructive. Science cannot be separated from its applications. Scientists cannot wash their hands of what is done with their discoveries. It is uncomfortable. It is unfair. But it is real. After Hiroshima, many Manhattan Project scientists suffer crises of conscience. Oppenheimer, who directed the project, quotes the Bhagavad Gita upon seeing the first nuclear test in July 1945. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. He spends the rest of his life advocating against nuclear weapons proliferation. Other scientists too. They form organizations. They publish manifestos. They warn about the dangers of a nuclear arms race. But it is too late. The technology exists. It cannot unexist. The Soviet Union develops its own atomic bomb in 1949. England in 1952. France in 1960. China in 1964. And so it continues. The nuclear club grows. Weapons become more powerful, more precise, more numerous. At the peak of the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union possessed more than 60,000 nuclear weapons combined. Enough to destroy the world several times over. We still live under that shadow. There are approximately 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world today. Fewer than before, but still more than enough. And the knowledge will never disappear. Any nation with sufficient resources and determination can build nuclear weapons. It is just physics. Physics that began with Marie Curie measuring the radioactivity of pitchblende samples in a cold shed in Paris. But the story does not end in destruction. The atom has two faces. Nuclear energy also powers cities. The first electricity-generating nuclear reactor goes into operation in 1951 in Idaho. It produces enough electricity to light 4 light bulbs. It is a modest beginning. But it is a beginning. In the following decades, nuclear reactors are built around the world. France generates 70% of its electricity with nuclear power. The United States has almost 100 operating nuclear reactors. Globally, there are more than 400 reactors in 30 countries. They generate approximately 10% of the world's electricity. Nuclear energy is controversial. Accidents are rare but devastating. 3 Mile Island in 1979. Chernobyl in 1986. Fukushima in 2011. Each accident releases radiation, contaminates territory, causes deaths and disease, and generates fear. Justified fear. Radiation is invisible, insidious, terrifying. But we must also consider the alternatives. Burning coal kills millions of people each year through air pollution. It massively contributes to climate change. Oil causes wars, spills, pollution. Natural gas is cleaner but still emits carbon. Renewables are promising but intermittent. Nuclear energy produces enormous amounts of electricity without carbon emissions, but with risk of catastrophic accidents and the unsolved problem of radioactive waste that remains dangerous for thousands of years. There is no easy answer. There is no perfect energy source. Every option has cost. Every option has risks. And we have to choose. Because humanity needs energy. Our civilizations run on electricity. Without it, hospitals cannot function. Communications collapse. Transportation stops. Food rots. Millions die. So we have to get energy from somewhere. And nuclear energy, direct descendant of Marie Curie's work, is one of the options. Not the only one. Not necessarily the best. But a real option with real advantages and real disadvantages. And nuclear medicine continues saving lives. Each year, millions of people receive diagnoses and treatments that depend on radioactive isotopes. PET scans use fluorine-18 to detect cancer early. Bone scans use technetium-99m to identify fractures, infections, metastases. Iodine-131 therapy treats thyroid cancer. Radium-223 treats metastatic prostate cancer. Lutetium-177 treats neuroendocrine tumors. These treatments would not exist without the discovery of radioactivity. Without Marie Curie, without Pierre, without decades of research that built on their work, modern medicine would be fundamentally different. More limited. Less effective. Millions of people who are alive today would be dead. So what is the final balance? Marie's radium has killed people. The radium girls. The Hibakusha of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The victims of Chernobyl. Soldiers exposed to nuclear tests. Uranium miners. Workers in nuclear facilities. Thousands dead. Perhaps tens of thousands. But it has also saved millions. Cancer patients. People who depend on nuclear electricity for hospitals, transportation, communication. The scientific knowledge that arose from studying radioactivity has transformed our understanding of the universe. It has made possible technologies Marie never imagined. Magnetic resonance imaging. Radiocarbon dating. Smoke detectors. Sterilization of medical equipment. Food preservation. Does the good outweigh the evil? It is not a question that can be answered objectively. It depends on how you value lives. On how you weigh present against future. On the risk you are willing to accept. But what is undeniable is this. Marie Curie changed the world. Profoundly. Permanently. For better and for worse. Inseparably. Her discovery was neutral. It was just science. Just the truth about how atoms work. But that truth had power. And that power has been used to create and destroy. To heal and kill. To illuminate cities and vaporize them. We cannot separate knowledge from its consequences. We cannot have the cure without the risk. We cannot understand the atom without also being able to break it. And that brings us to the fundamental question Marie Curie's life raises. Should we seek knowledge even if that knowledge is dangerous? Even if it can be used for evil? Even if it can destroy us? The instinctive answer of many people is yes. Knowledge is intrinsically valuable. Truth is worthwhile. Understanding the universe is part of what makes us human. Stopping scientific research out of fear of consequences is cowardice. It is obscurantism. It is rejecting our nature. But the question is not so simple. Because there are types of knowledge that are inherently dangerous. Knowledge about how to create pandemics. How to hack critical systems. How to build weapons of mass destruction. Should we seek that knowledge? Should we publish it? Share it? And if we discover it, what responsibility do we have over how it is used? The scientists of the Manhattan Project discovered how to build the atomic bomb. Are they responsible for Hiroshima? For Nagasaki? For every nuclear weapon built since? Many of them would say yes. That yes, they are responsible. That knowledge carries responsibility. That you cannot simply discover how to destroy the world and then wash your hands saying you are just a scientist. Marie Curie never had to face that question directly. She died before the bomb. Before the full consequences of her discovery manifested. But she lived long enough to see the damage radium caused. The radium girls. Factory workers. Her own destroyed body. And she chose to continue. Continue researching. Continue teaching. Continue promoting radium use in medicine. Because for her, knowledge was supreme. Knowledge justified the cost. Even the cost of her own life. Even the cost of other lives. It was a harsh position. Almost cruel. But it was also honest. It was consistent. It was who she was. We, a century later, have the benefit of hindsight. We can see the complete path from the damp shed in Paris to Hiroshima. From the beautiful glow of radium to the atomic mushroom cloud. We can measure the costs and benefits in a way Marie never could. And still we do not have a clear answer. Because progress is never simple. Never purely good or bad. It is complicated. It is ambiguous. It is human. Marie Curie personifies that ambiguity. She was brilliant and obsessive. Generous with her knowledge but ruthless with herself. She saved lives with her radiological units in the war but slowly killed herself with her own discovery. She opened entire fields of science but also opened the door to weapons that could end civilization. She was a human being. Imperfect. Complex. Real. And her legacy is equally complex. Equally real. Equally impossible to judge simply. What we can say is this. We live in the world Marie Curie helped create. A world where we understand the atom. Where we can manipulate matter at the nuclear level. Where we have power over the fundamental forces of the universe. It is a world of astonishing possibilities and terrifying dangers. A world where medicine can cure diseases that were once death sentences. A world where weapons can destroy cities in seconds. A world where energy can be abundant or catastrophic. A world where every scientific advance brings hope and risk inextricably intertwined. And in that world we have to choose. Choose how we use knowledge. Choose what we build. What we destroy. What we value. What we risk. Marie gave us tools. Powerful tools. Dangerous tools. But she did not give us instructions. She did not tell us how to use them. She could not. No one can. That choice, that responsibility is ours. It has always been ours. It will always be ours. Radium still glows in the dark. Beautiful. Deadly. Unchanging. Like knowledge itself. Like progress. Like the human hunger to understand that led a poor young woman from Poland to Paris, to a cold shed, to tons of toxic mineral, to a discovery that changed the world forever. That hunger does not stop. It cannot stop. It is part of what we are. And it will take humanity to unimaginable heights or to its own destruction. Or, more probably, to both. Because that is progress. That is how it has always been. And that, probably, is how it will always be. In the final years of her life, Marie Curie becomes something more than a scientist. She becomes a symbol. A living icon of the triumph of human intellect over adversity. Universities around the world invite her to lecture. Governments award her medals. Newspapers publish her photographs. Children study her biography in schools. She is the woman who overcame poverty, discrimination, personal tragedy, and discovered secrets of the universe no one else had glimpsed. She is inspiring. She is heroic. She is, in the eyes of the public, perfect. But the reality is much more complicated, much more human. Marie in 1930 is not the brilliant young woman who arrived hungry in Paris. She is not the tireless researcher who processed tons of pitchblende with her own hands. She is a 63-year-old woman whose body is systematically failing. Her hands tremble constantly, not from nervousness but from permanent neurological damage. The chemical and radioactive burns from decades of work have left thick scars on her fingers. The skin has become leathery, discolored. She has difficulty holding small objects, writing, doing the delicate laboratory work that was once her life. Her eyes are perhaps the most tragic. Marie was always a voracious reader. She devoured books, scientific articles, physics treatises, novels in her rare moments of rest. But cataracts have progressively clouded her vision. She has had multiple surgeries. Surgeons cut her corneas. They extract the clouded lenses. It is painful. Recoveries are long. And improvements are temporary. Radiation has damaged her eyes so deeply that no surgery can fully restore her vision. By 1932, Marie wears thick glasses with magnifying lenses. And still she has to hold pages close to her face. She squints. She tires after reading only a few minutes. It is frustrating. It is devastating. For someone whose life has been study, reading, meticulous observation, losing vision is losing part of her identity. But perhaps the most insidious, most deadly damage is happening where no one can see it. Inside her bones. Marie's bone marrow is destroyed. The stem cells that produce blood cells have been bombarded by radiation for decades. They have accumulated mutations, DNA damage. Many have died. Those that remain function poorly. The result is aplastic anemia. Her body does not produce enough red blood cells. Not enough white blood cells. Not enough platelets. She is constantly tired because her blood does not carry enough oxygen. She is constantly sick because her immune system is compromised. She bleeds easily because she does not have enough platelets to clot blood. It is a downward spiral. And there is no treatment. In 1930, medicine can do nothing for aplastic anemia. There are no effective blood transfusions. No growth factors. No bone marrow transplants. They can only watch as her blood fails. As she slowly fades. Doctors do not openly use the term radiation poisoning. It is too alarming. Too political. Marie Curie is a French national heroine. She is a symbol of French science. Admitting she is dying from her own discovery would be admitting radium is dangerous. And radium is an important French industry. There are jobs. There is money. There is national prestige. So doctors speak of pernicious anemia, of nervous exhaustion, of recurrent infections. But Marie knows. She knows exactly what is happening to her. She has seen other people exposed to radiation. She has read studies about the radium girls. She has observed her own deterioration for years. She is not foolish. She is one of the most brilliant scientists in history. She understands perfectly that her body is paying the price of decades of exposure to radioactive materials. Does she regret it? It is hard to know. Marie is intensely private. She does not talk about her feelings. She does not write confessional diaries except for the brief months after Pierre's death. She does not complain. When asked about her health, she responds briefly, changes the subject, returns to work. But there are moments, fleeting moments where something filters through. In 1932, a journalist asks her if she would do it all again knowing what she knows now. Marie is silent for a long moment. Then she says, "Knowledge has a price. It always does. But knowledge is also invaluable. You cannot put a price on understanding the universe. It is not exactly an answer. It is an evasion. But it is also revealing." Marie is saying the price was worth it. That knowledge justifies suffering. But she is also admitting there is a price, that it is not free, that she has paid it. Her laboratory notebooks are physical evidence of that price. Marie kept meticulous records throughout her career. Every experiment documented, every measurement recorded, every observation noted. The notebooks fill shelves in her laboratory, dozens of volumes, hundreds of pages, and they are all contaminated. Radium dust settled on the pages while she worked. Splashes of radioactive solution stained the paper. Her own hands, covered with invisible radium, left radioactive fingerprints each time she turned a page. The notebooks are invaluable scientific documents, but they are also dangerous. They emit radiation, constantly. Even today, almost 90 years after her death, Marie Curie's notebooks must be stored in lead-lined boxes. If you want to consult them, you must go to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. You must sign a waiver. You must wear protective gloves. You must limit your exposure time, because the pages themselves are radioactive. They will remain radioactive for centuries, millennia. It is a strange legacy, beautiful and terrifying. Those notebooks contain the map of one of the most important discoveries in history. But they also contain poison. They are knowledge and danger fused inseparably. They are exactly like radium itself. Brilliant, revealing, lethal. Marie understands this better than anyone, and in her final years she becomes more cautious. Not with her own safety, it is too late for that, but with her students, with her laboratory workers. She implements safety protocols. She insists they use tongs to handle radioactive materials, that they wash their hands frequently, that they not eat or drink in the laboratory, that they monitor their exposure. These are basic measures. They should have been implemented from the beginning. But in 1900 no one knew. In 1930 they do know. Anne-Marie does what she can to protect the next generation of scientists from the fate she herself has suffered. Her daughter Irene is a source of pride and concern. Irene has followed in her mother's footsteps. She is a brilliant physicist. She works with radioactive materials. She has made important discoveries. She will win the Nobel Prize in 1935. But she is also exposing her body to radiation. She is repeating her mother's pattern. Marie sees it. She understands it. But what can she do? Tell Irene to stop doing science? To abandon her career to protect her health? It would be hypocritical. Marie never did that. Why would she expect her daughter to? So she watches. She worries silently. And she hopes Irene takes more precautions than she herself took. In 1933, Marie attends a scientific conference in Brussels. It is the 7th Solvay Conference, a meeting of the world's most important physicists. Einstein is there. Or Heisenberg, Pauli, Dirac. The architects of quantum mechanics, the new physics that has revolutionized our understanding of the atom. Marie listens to them talk about wave functions, uncertainty principles, wave-particle duality. It is abstract physics, mathematical, very far removed from the brutal chemical work she did to isolate radium 30 years before. But it is also physics that would not have been possible without her work. Without the discovery that atoms have internal structure, that they emit radiation, that they transform spontaneously. The Curies provided crucial experimental evidence that quantum theory needed. They opened the way. During the conference, the young physicists treat Marie with reverence, with respect, but also with a certain distance. She is a figure from the past, a pioneer, a founder. But physics has advanced beyond her work. She is no longer at the forefront. She is no longer making the most revolutionary discoveries. It is a painful transition for any scientist, to go from being the discoverer to being history. But Marie accepts it with grace. She listens to the presentations. She asks intelligent questions. And at night in her hotel room she probably reflects on how science advances, how each generation builds on the previous one, how her work, monumental as it may be, is only one step on an infinite ladder toward understanding. The winter of 1933 to 1934 is particularly difficult. Marie has recurring fevers, chills, extreme weakness. Doctors diagnose flu, bronchitis, But it is more than that. Her immune system is so compromised that any infection is potentially fatal. Her body cannot fight diseases like before. In March 1934, she contracts another infection, this time in her lungs. She has difficulty breathing, constant coughing, high fever. Doctors prescribe rest. Antibiotics do not exist yet. There is no effective treatment. She can only rest and hope her body recovers. But her body is exhausted. It has fought for decades. It no longer has reserves. In May 1934, Marie is so ill she can no longer work. She can no longer get out of bed most days. Eve, her younger daughter, is with her constantly. Irene comes when she can, but she has her own family, her own laboratory. Marie insists that Irene continue working. She does not want to be a burden. She does not want her illness to stop science. It is characteristic. Even dying, she thinks first of the work. Doctors recommend mountain air. It was a common treatment for lung diseases at that time. The idea was that fresh, clean air would help the lungs heal. So on May 30, 1934, Marie is transported to the Saint-Célimas Sanatorium in Passy in the French Alps. It is a beautiful place, surrounded by mountains, pure air, silence. Marie has a room with a view of the mountains. She can see the snow-covered peaks, the green forest, the blue sky. It is tranquil, serene. A marked contrast to the damp, dark shed where she spent years processing pitchblende, with the field hospitals where she worked during the war, with the laboratories filled with bubbling tubes and chemical vapors. Here there is only silence, nature, beauty. But beauty cannot save her. Her condition deteriorates. The fever increases. She has hallucinations. She says things without sense. Doctors take blood samples. They analyze them. The results are devastating. Her red blood cell count is catastrophically low. Her white blood cell count too. Her bone marrow has almost completely stopped functioning. It is aplastic anemia in its most severe form. It is a death sentence. And everyone knows it. Marie probably knows it too in her lucid moments. Eve is with her. She reads to her. She talks to her. She holds her hand. Marie sleeps a lot. When she is awake, she sometimes talks about Pierre. About their work together. About the shed. About the nights when they returned to the laboratory after dinner and watched the radium tubes glowing in the darkness. They were beautiful, she says. So beautiful. It is one of her last coherent memories. The glow of radium. The substance she discovered. The substance that killed her. And she remembers it as beautiful. Because it was. Because despite everything, despite the pain and suffering and death, it was a magnificent discovery. It was knowledge. It was truth. And for Marie, that was always the most important thing. On July 4, 1934, at 9 in the morning, Marie Curie dies. She is 66 years old. The official cause of death is aplastic pernicious anemia of rapid development, febrile. But the real cause is radiation poisoning. Decades of exposure to radioactive materials have destroyed her bone marrow. They have compromised her immune system. They have killed her cells one by one. It is a slow death, painful. But in the end it is peaceful. Marie simply falls asleep and does not wake up. The funeral is private, small. Only family and close friends. There are no state ceremonies. No crowds. Marie would have wanted it this way. She is buried in Sceaux, a suburb of Paris, in the same grave where Pierre has been since 1906. 28 years separated in life. Now together again. Marie's coffin is placed directly over Pierre's. It is symbolic. Appropriate. They were together in science. Together in life. And now together in death. But there is a macabre detail that funeral attendees do not know. Marie's coffin is lined with lead, a thick layer, because her body is radioactive. The radium she absorbed during decades has been incorporated into her bones. And it will remain there, emitting radiation, for centuries. Radium has a half-life of 1600 years. That means that in 1600 years, only half the radium in Marie's bones will have decayed. Her body will be literally radioactive longer than human civilization has existed since the pyramids of Egypt. It is an involuntary monument, a permanent reminder of the power she unleashed, of the price she paid. The obituaries are respectful. They speak of her brilliance, her discoveries, her 2 Nobel Prizes, her valor during the war. But they underestimate her importance. They cannot see not yet how profoundly she has changed the world, how her work will eventually lead to the atomic bomb, to nuclear reactors, to modern nuclear medicine, to a completely new understanding of matter and energy. In 1934, this is still future, still potential. The obituaries see Marie Curie as a great scientist. They cannot see that she is one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, that her discovery will divide human history into before and after. Before understanding the atom. After understanding the atom. Irene continues her mother's work. She makes her own revolutionary discovery, artificial radioactivity. She wins the Nobel Prize in 1935. Marie does not live to see it, but she would have been immensely proud. The Curie dynasty continues. But Irene also pays the price. She works with radioactive materials all her life. And in 1956, at 58 years old, she dies of leukemia, caused by radiation exposure. Mother and daughter. Both brilliant, both Nobel winners, both killed by their own work. It is a tragedy. But it is also, in a certain twisted way, consistent. They dedicated their lives to knowledge. And knowledge killed them. They did not regret it. Neither of them. Knowledge was worth the price. Eve, the younger daughter who chose not to be a scientist, lives until 2007. 102 years. She writes the definitive biography of her mother. She becomes an activist, journalist, diplomat. She has a long and full life. And she never works with radiation. The lesson is clear. But it is also uncomfortable. Did Eve have a better life because she avoided science? Or simply a longer life? Is the length of life more important than contribution? How much is a life of discovery worth against a life of longevity? There is no right answer. Only personal preferences. Different values. In the years after Marie's death, the world begins to truly understand what she discovered. Nuclear physics advances rapidly. In 1938, nuclear fission is discovered. In 1942, the first nuclear reactor goes into operation. In 1945, atomic bombs destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All of this is a direct descendant of Marie's work. She opened the door. Others walked through it. But without that first door, none of this would have been possible. Not at that time. Perhaps never. Would Marie have approved of the atomic bomb? We will never know. She died 11 years before. But we can speculate. Pierre warned in 1905 that radium could be dangerous in the wrong hands. That humanity was discovering powers it did not yet fully understand. Marie surely shared that concern. But she also believed deeply in the pursuit of knowledge. That scientists could not stop investigating out of fear of consequences. That knowledge itself was neutral. Applications could be good or bad, but knowledge was just knowledge. She would probably have been horrified by Hiroshima, by the deaths, by the destruction. But she would also have understood that once knowledge exists, it cannot unexist. That the bomb was an inevitable consequence of understanding nuclear fission. That you cannot discover how to split the atom without also discovering how to make a bomb. Knowledge and its applications are intertwined, inseparable. This is the question that haunts Marie Curie's legacy. Should we seek knowledge even if that knowledge is dangerous? Even if it can destroy us? It is the most important question of the scientific age. And it has no easy answer. We could say yes, that knowledge is always worthwhile. That understanding the universe is intrinsically valuable. That the benefits of scientific progress outweigh the risks. And there is evidence for that. Modern medicine has saved millions of lives. Technology has improved the standard of living globally. Scientific knowledge has liberated humanity from superstitions, irrational fears, limitations that once seemed absolute. We live longer, healthier, more comfortably than any previous generation. And that is thanks to science. Thanks to people like Marie Curie who sought knowledge regardless of personal cost. But we could also say no. That there are limits. That some knowledge is too dangerous. that we have discovered powers we cannot control, that the atomic bomb, climate change, pandemics created in laboratories, artificial intelligence that could surpass us, all these are examples of knowledge we perhaps should not have sought, or at least not so quickly, not without first thinking about consequences, without developing the moral wisdom to accompany technological power. Knowledge advances faster than ethics. Science progresses faster than human maturity. And that gap is dangerous, potentially fatal. Marie Curie embodies this tension. Her life is an argument for the relentless pursuit of knowledge. She overcame impossible obstacles. She discovered truths no one else had seen. She transformed our understanding of the universe. She saved countless lives. She inspired generations of scientists. She demonstrated that human intellect can transcend social, economic, physical limitations. She is heroic. She is inspiring. She is a triumph of the human spirit. But her life is also a warning. Knowledge has costs, sometimes terrible costs. Marie paid with her health, with her life. The Radium girls paid with their lives. The victims of Hiroshima paid with their lives. We live under the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. We manage radioactive waste that will remain dangerous for thousands of years. We have unleashed forces we can barely control. And it all began with a woman in a shed processing mineral. With pure curiosity. With hunger to understand. So what is the final verdict on Marie Curie? Heroine or warning? Triumph or tragedy? The answer is both. Always both. Because human reality is complex. There are no simple narratives. No easy judgments. Marie Curie was a brilliant scientist who made fundamental discoveries. She was also a woman who suffered terribly. Who paid a brutal price for her knowledge. Who opened doors that perhaps should not have been opened. Or perhaps should have. We do not know. We cannot know. We can only live with the consequences. And the consequences are enormous. Every time someone receives radiation therapy treatment for cancer, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time you turn on a light powered by nuclear energy, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time an archaeologist dates an artifact with carbon-14, it is thanks to Marie Curie. Every time you look at the night sky and know that stars function by nuclear fusion, it is thanks to Marie Curie. She did not do all these things directly, but she made possible the knowledge that made them possible. She opened the path. She showed that the atom has secrets. And those secrets have transformed absolutely everything. But also, every nuclear weapon that exists because Marie Curie discovered that atoms are not immutable. Every nuclear disaster, every nuclear plant worker who develops cancer, every community contaminated with radioactive waste, all these are descendants of her discovery. It is not her fault. She had no intention of creating weapons. She could not foresee the consequences. But neither can she be completely separated from those consequences. Knowledge does not exist in a vacuum. It has effects, and the effects are both good and bad. Always, there is an image that summarizes everything. It is imaginary but powerful. Marie Curie standing in her dark shed in 1902. She is holding a small tube containing pure radium. The tube glows with a soft blue-green light. Beautiful. Mysterious. Marie observes it with wonder, with curiosity, with joy. In her eyes there is pure marvel. This is the moment of discovery, the moment where the invisible becomes visible, where mystery reveals itself, where the universe shares one of its secrets. It is a moment of absolute triumph, of pure scientific joy. But if we could see the future, if we could see everything that will come from that glowing tube, we would see a very different image. We would see Hiroshima. We would see Chernobyl. We would see the Radium girls dying in agony. We would see Marie's own body destroyed by radiation. But we would also see hospitals saving lives. We would see cities illuminated by nuclear energy. We would see scientific discoveries that would not have been possible without understanding radioactivity. We would see everything. The good and the evil. Mixed. Inseparable. Anne-Marie, standing in her shed, sees none of that. She only sees the glow. She only feels the joy of discovery. She only knows she has found something new, something important. And it is enough. For her, in that moment, it is enough. Knowledge justifies everything. The price does not matter. The future does not matter. Only truth matters. Only understanding matters. That is Marie Curie's lesson. Or perhaps the question she leaves us. Is knowledge enough? Does it justify the costs? Is it worth the price? Each person must answer for themselves. Each generation must decide. Each scientist who begins a new project, who explores a new field, who asks a question no one has asked before, must consider. What am I unleashing? What consequences will my discovery have? Am I prepared to live with those consequences? Marie never asked herself those questions. Or if she did, she decided that knowledge was more important. That understanding the universe was the highest imperative. That scientists must seek truth no matter where it leads them. It is a respectable position. Noble even. But it is also dangerous. Because truth is not always benevolent. Knowledge is not always safe. And curiosity, wonderful as it is, can kill you. In 1995, 61 years after her death, France decided to honor Marie Curie in an unprecedented way. They transferred her remains along with Pierre's to the Pantheon in Paris. The Pantheon is the final resting place of France's greatest heroes. Voltaire is there. Rousseau. Victor Hugo. Émile Zola. Giants of literature, philosophy, politics. And now Marie Curie. She became the first woman buried in the Pantheon on her own merits, not simply as the wife of an important man. The ceremony was conducted by President François Mitterrand. He said, "By transferring the ashes of Marie Curie to the sanctuary of our collective memory, France not only does justice to an exceptional woman or a committed scientist. France proclaims loudly that women, like men, must participate in the continuous improvement of human knowledge." But there was a macabre consideration. Marie's coffin had to be lined with 1-inch thick lead. Because after 61 years her body is still radioactive. It emits radiation. It will for centuries. Millennia. The radium she absorbed during decades of work was incorporated into her bones. And radium has a half-life of 1600 years. That means in 1600 years, only half the radium in her bones will have decayed. In 3,200 years, 3/4. Marie Curie will be literally radioactive longer than written civilization has existed up to now. It is an involuntary monument. Her own body is permanent evidence of the power she unleashed. And her family continued paying the price. Irène Joliot-Curie, her older daughter, who worked with radioactive materials all her life, died of leukemia in 1956 at 58 years old. Caused by radiation exposure. Eve, her younger daughter, who chose not to be a scientist but a writer and activist, lived to be 102 years old. The only one in the family who avoided working with radiation was the only one who had a long life. It is a brutal lesson about the cost of knowledge. But the work continued. Marie's students formed the next generation of nuclear physicists. The Radium Institute of Paris, which Marie founded and directed, became a world center of research. Today it is part of the Institute Curie, which specializes in cancer research. Each year it treats thousands of patients. Each year, it makes advances in understanding and treating cancer. The Curie name is synonymous with hope for cancer patients around the world. It is ironic and appropriate. Marie died of a disease caused by radiation, but her work has saved countless lives from cancer through radiotherapy. The unit of radioactivity is called the Curie in her honor. 1 Curie is the amount of radioactivity in 1 gram of radium-226. It is a large unit because radium is intensely radioactive. Today scientists prefer to use a smaller unit called the becquerel, but the Curie is still used. Every time a nuclear physicist measures radioactivity and says 3 millicuries, they are invoking her name. Her legacy is inscribed in the very language of science. There are monuments to Marie Curie around the world. Statues in Paris, in Warsaw, in New York. Commemorative plaques. Museums. The house where she was born in Warsaw is now a museum dedicated to her life. Streets bear her name. Schools. Universities. Hospitals. Her face appeared on Polish banknotes. On postage stamps. On coins. Films have been made about her life. Plays. Operas. countless books. Her story is taught to children around the world as an example of determination, of overcoming obstacles, of scientific excellence. But perhaps her most important legacy is more subtle. Marie Curie demonstrated that women can be world-class scientists, that gender does not determine intellectual capacity, that a woman can discover fundamental truths about the universe. It sounds obvious now, but in her time it was revolutionary. She faced constant discrimination, closed doors, mockery, skepticism, open misogyny, and she overcame all of it. Not because she was perfect, she was human. She made mistakes. She had flaws. She was obsessive to the point of self-destruction. She was so dedicated to her work that she sometimes neglected other parts of her life. But she was brilliant. She was tenacious. And she changed the world. Every woman scientist who came after her walked on a path Marie helped clear. Every physics student who is a woman is there in part because Marie demonstrated it was possible. Every woman scientist who wins a Nobel Prize, and there are many now, stands on Marie Curie's shoulders. Her impact on gender equality in science is incalculable. She did not do it deliberately. She was not a feminist activist. She did not give speeches about women's rights. She simply did brilliant science and refused to be stopped by her gender. And that example was more powerful than 1,000 manifestos. But let us return to the beginning. To that hungry young woman in a freezing attic in Paris. To the poor immigrant who ate radishes because she could not afford anything else. To the woman who fainted from malnutrition over her notes. That woman discovered that atoms are not eternal. That matter can transform. That hidden in the depths of the atomic nucleus is an almost incomprehensible energy. She discovered that the universe is much stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. And she paid for that knowledge with her health, with decades of pain, with her life eventually. Was it worth it? It is an impossible question. For Marie, probably yes. She chose her path knowing the costs. She worked until her body gave out. She never complained. She never asked for pity. She did what she loved, discovered truths no one else had seen, and transformed the world. That was enough for her. But for humanity, the question is more complicated. Radium has saved millions of lives. It has also killed thousands. Nuclear energy could solve climate change or could cause catastrophic disasters. Nuclear weapons have maintained peace through mutual deterrence or could end civilization in an afternoon. The knowledge Marie discovered is neutral. The tools she created are tools. They can build or destroy. And that choice is in our hands. It always has been. It always will be. Marie Curie did not invent human goodness or evil. She only gave us power. More power than we knew how to handle. And there is the ultimate lesson of her life. Scientific progress outpaces moral wisdom. We discover how to split the atom before we learn how to coexist in peace. We learn to release nuclear energy before we fully understand its consequences. Knowledge advances faster than ethics. That gap is dangerous. That gap could destroy us. But it is also inevitable. We cannot stop the pursuit of knowledge. It is in our nature to ask, to explore, to discover. Marie Curie personified that pursuit. Her hunger to understand was literal and metaphorical. Hungry for food in her youth, yes, but more deeply hungry for knowledge. Hungry for truth. And that hunger took her to heights no one had reached before. But it also took her to a damp basement breathing toxic vapors. It took her to handling lethal materials with bare hands. It took her to a slow death by radioactive poisoning. There is a famous photograph of Marie taken near the end of her life. She is sitting at her desk at the Radium Institute. Her face is gaunt. Her eyes, clouded by cataracts, look toward the camera with an expression difficult to decipher. Weariness? Satisfaction? Resignation? Peace? Probably all of that. Behind her are shelves filled with tubes and bottles, many containing radioactive materials. The room itself is contaminated. The desk, the walls, the air. Everything emits radiation. And she knows it. She has known for years that radium is killing her. But there she is, still working, still searching, still trying to understand a little more before time runs out. That image summarizes her life. A tireless pursuit of knowledge despite all costs. A woman surrounded by the very discovery that is killing her, but without regrets, without complaints, without pause. Only work. Only science. Only the eternal pursuit of truth. Radium illuminated the world. Literally and figuratively. It glowed in the dark. It revealed the invisible. It showed the hidden structure of the atom. It demonstrated that matter is not solid, that everything is made of tiny particles in constant motion, that energy and mass are interchangeable, that the universe is fundamentally strange and beautiful. But that same glow was deadly. The light that revealed the atom's secrets also burned those who looked too closely. Marie Curie looked. She looked more closely than anyone, and she saw wonders, and she paid the ultimate price. Her story is a warning and an inspiration. A warning about the dangers of unchecked progress. An inspiration about what a human being can achieve with enough determination. It is the story of the 20th century condensed into one life. Scientific discovery. Technological progress. Or healing. Destruction. Hope. All mixed. All inseparable. And in the end, what remains is this. A poor woman from an occupied country came to Paris hungry and alone. She survived the cold, hunger, discrimination, brutal poverty. She studied when everyone told her women could not be scientists. She worked when everyone told her it was impossible. She discovered elements no one knew existed. She opened entire fields of science. She saved countless lives during the war. She trained the next generation of scientists. She won 2 Nobel Prizes. And she died slowly poisoned by her own discovery, her body transformed into a radioactive monument to the power of the atom. Progress is not born from power. It is born from hunger. From the hunger to understand. And that hunger, that insatiable curiosity about how the universe works, is humanity's most powerful force. It is what separates us from other animals. It is what makes us explore, invent, create, discover. It is what makes us human. But it is also what makes us dangerous. Because knowledge without wisdom is a weapon. And humanity has always been better at discovering how to do things than at deciding whether we should do them. Marie Curie gave us fire. Atomic fire. And like Prometheus's original fire, it can heat our homes or burn our cities. The choice is ours. It has always been ours. Her legacy is not just radium or radioactivity or Nobel Prizes. Her legacy is that eternal question facing every generation. What do we do with the power we discover? How do we use the knowledge we unearth? Can we be wise enough to handle the forces we learn to control? We do not know the answer yet. Perhaps we never will. But the question itself is Marie Curie's true legacy. And as long as humanity exists, as long as we seek to understand, as long as we hunger for knowledge, that question will remain, glowing in the darkness like radium. Beautiful, dangerous, unforgettable, eternal.